Chairman, we are now live.
Thank you very much, everybody. Am I getting some feedback? Okay, sorry. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. I'm Councillor Caroline Culver. I am the Chairman of Scrutiny Commission. Welcome this evening. It's great to see so many people here. Members of the Commission present this evening are Councillors Dominic Bowick, Paul Dick, Stuart Gawley. I believe Ross McKinnon is joining us shortly. Jeff Mays, Eric Pattenden, Justin Pemberton and Christopher Reid. I think I've got other members here, Councillor Clive Hooker, Councillor David Marsh. Thank you for joining us. Council officers present this evening, we've got John Winstanley and Paul Backus. I think that's it. Yep. I'd also like to welcome our guests this evening. We have Richard Aylard, Karen Nelson and Nikki Hines from Thames Water. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And we also have Dave Willis from the Environment Agency. Thank you. We also have 7 stakeholder organisations with us this evening. They include River Action, Action for the River Kennet, Lambourne Flood Forum, East Garston Flood Forum, Pang Valley Flood Forum, Thatcham Flood Forum and the Newbury Clay Hill Flood Warden. Gordon Oliver is the clerk for the meeting. The meeting is being live streamed via YouTube and Ben Ryan is the Zoom host. Before we start proceedings, I would like to explain for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom and with councillors present in the meeting room. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please can I ask everyone participating in the meeting to make sure they switch on their microphones when invited to speak and to speak directly into the microphone and to switch them off when they have finished. If we hear the fire alarm this evening, we must leave the building immediately via the emergency exit. So we have one out there and one over there. The assembly point is the Dolphin car park. If the lockdown alarm sounds, we will remain seated and await instructions from officers. We will adjourn the meeting until such time as it is safe to proceed. Do members have any questions about the way in which this meeting will be conducted before we proceed? No, thank you very much. Do we have any apologies, please, Mr. Oliver?
Yes, Chairman, we've had apologies from Councillor Anthony Armitage and Councillor Stuart Gurley is present as his substitute.
Thank you very much. Do any members have declarations of interest relating to tonight's items? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, so as we know, we're here for a special meeting of the Scrutiny Commission tonight to focus on water and sewage and so on. As you know, we have taken many questions from members of the public and the stakeholder organisations and councillors, and we forwarded those on to Thames Water and the Environment Agency so that they knew in advance what questions we wanted to ask. So topics will cover things like what has been done since the last scrutiny review in September 2022 to address issues associated with sewage discharges. What other investment has been carried out to improve fresh and foul water networks in the district? What additional investment is planned to address known problems with local fresh and foul water infrastructure? What progress has been made in upgrading fresh and foul water infrastructure to support planned development? And then there will be responses to the various and numerous questions that have been sent to our guest this evening. For the Environment Agency, what's the role of the Environment Agency in monitoring water quality and water courses? What enforcement powers does the Environment Agency have in relation to pollution by the water companies? What action has been taken against Thames Water? And again, responses to questions that have been forwarded in advance. I'm very keen that this is part of an ongoing conversation. As I've mentioned, we had Thames Water here last year, and hopefully maybe we will have them in future years and we can monitor progress as we go forward. I know that the various forums who are here this evening do have lines of communication already with these organisations, and I hope we can keep those lines of communication open, and we have a very useful dialogue this evening, and we can keep a note of the actions that we need to keep an eye on going forwards. In terms of the format, just to remind members, we will be inviting our guests to give speeches first. We will then open it up to questions from members of Scrutiny Commission. Also, any other councillors who are here who wish to ask questions are welcome to do so. And then we will seek to suspend standing orders so that the members of the public from the 7 stakeholder organisations are able to ask one question each. So without any further ado, I will invite members from Thames Water to give their presentation, which I understand is going to be around about 40 minutes, just so that people are aware, because there's obviously a lot of things for them to cover. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the welcome, Madam Chair. This time last year, we had a lot of questions, though less than this year. And we weren't able to get through them all in the time, but your officers worked with my colleague Nikki on my right here, and we followed up all those questions with individual councillors and organisations, and we'd like to do the same again tonight. So if we don't get to an individual question, we're very happy to pick that up separately. It says up there, Richard Aylard and James Bentley. James Bentley is our Director for Operations for Thames Valley and Home Counties, and unfortunately, he's unwell. He's got a trapped nerve in his neck and he can't drive, and he's currently lying down waiting for a physiotherapist. So any of us who have been there will sympathise with that. On my left, I've got Karen Nelson, who runs our wastewater networks in the area. And on my right, Nikki Hines, who's our local and regional government liaison. So if I can just start then with, right, okay. So I want to cover a little bit about the leadership changes at Thames Water. I want to talk about our draft business plan, which in the jargon is PR24, Price Review 2024, which will affect bills and expenditure from April 2025 onwards. I want to talk about how Sewage Works operates. Some people will know that, others won't. And I want to talk about challenges, capacity, talk about our storm discharge map, planning for the future, local updates on our GZIMPs, more jargon, groundwater impacted system management plans. World needs more 5-letter acronyms. Our reporter pollution tool, and then we'll do questions. And I think that'll probably take about 40 minutes, but we'll see. So if I start, here are some sample questions we had. Councillor Chris Reed talked about our poor financial resilience position. Councillor Stuart Gawley asked about investment, and you, Madam Chair, asked about are we making good progress on delivering the commitments that we've made. So let me just pick those up. In terms of leadership, Sarah Bentley, our Chief Executive, resigned after 3 years in June. And we now have Catherine Ross, who was our Regulation and External Affairs Director, and Al Cochrane, our CFO, acting as joint interim CEOs while we recruit a new Chief Executive, and that process is ongoing. But we were always about to appoint a new chairman. So Sir Adrian Montague had been recruited, and when Sarah left, we were able to immediately announce his appointment, and he started actually a few days early. He's now working with the board to find a new permanent chief executive, and I don't have any update on the timings for that. But in terms of financing, there's been a lot of talk about the company's financial position, and actually we've got a strong liquidity position. We've got 4.5 billion of liquidity, and we're working constructively in relation to further equity funding. So, looking at the big picture, yes, we've got 14 billion pounds of debt, but that is set against an asset base valued at 19 billion. And 97% of that debt is fixed in real terms. So our exposure to rising debt costs is actually pretty limited. To support the turnaround plan, our shareholders have subscribed an additional 500 million of new equity, and they're committed a further 750 million in the current period. And also that looking forwards to the next period, AMP8 is asset management plan number 8, starts in 2025. And they think they're going to have to put in about another 2.5 billion. And that's against a background where over the current 5-year period, we are overspending by about £1 billion. And in the previous 5 years, it was 770 million. So investment has undoubtedly, with hindsight, been less than was required, but it isn't less than was actually allowed for in the regulators' calculations when they set bills for the period. So keeping bills down for customers has been, for them, a very good thing, but it has meant that we've had to overspend significantly. And of course, we're now looking ahead to the next period. And that overspend Majority, about 25% gets charged to customers, 75% is shareholder money. So £1 billion of overspend is a significant amount. So on the 5-year plan, we are putting in for a record level of investment, 18.7 billion. In the current period, we put in for 11.6 and we got just over 10. So this is a 40% increase in investment. And that is really the biggest envelope which we think is affordable for our customers and actually deliverable within the 5 years. And you can see there, 4.7 billion of that is improving quality of service. And then as we go down the page, you can see all the other spend. And I put the environmental spend at the bottom, 6.6 billion on improving the environment, 885 million of which is reducing storm overflows, a 30% drop in pollution incidents, and a 22% reduction in leakage. So that's in the plan. But it's a draft plan, and we're working with our regulators, particularly Ofwat, Environment Agency, also Drinking Water Inspectorate and Natural England, and all under the oversight of DEFRA. And there will be changes. So some of the things that we put in that 18.7 billion, Ofwat will challenge in terms of efficiency. So they might say, well, you need to do all that. We're only going to give you 17 billion to do it. And similarly, other people will say, you need to put in an extra 100 million for this. And the question then will be, where are we going to take 100 million out? So, these discussions are going to be going on a lot over the next few months. And we'll get a final determination in about a year's time. So there's very much a live discussion about how much gets spent and what it gets spent on. But the plan is on our website as of last Thursday, and we'd encourage people to take a look. Looking more specifically now at the environmental side, first section there is on leakage, but I know we're talking mainly about wastewater tonight. So you can see there, and these slides have been made available. I've actually updated the original deck that we sent out. So pollution incidents down 20%, storm overflows by 28%, bathing water quality, where we've got designation, which at the moment is only one site. Not relevant to West Berkshire by any means, but the Thames Tideway Tunnel is a very significant measure for London, and will reduce blockages caused by sewer misuse by 15%. And Karen, who's the person who deals with all those blockages, or her team do, and she gets her hands dirty as well. We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. And then we're also generating a lot more renewable energy from the sewage. So our lovely customers give us free every day. We can generate a lot of energy on that, which helps to keep bills down. And of course, it's all entirely renewable. So the section here and what this means for the bill, I'm not going to go through this, but the diagram on the right there, where every pound of your money goes, it is actually quite interesting in showing that, of every pound, 48p is going on investment in infrastructure, 20% on operational expenditure, and then you've got people costs, energy, and so on. And we do, for anybody who wants to get into the detail, we have a document on our website called Our Finances Explained, which goes into more detail on this. But I'm not going to spend much more time on finances because I think we want to get on to the more local issues. So again, Chair, you said that we committed to a 50% reduction in total duration of spills, and you wanted to know, are we on target to achieve it? What happened there was we were first out of the box at the water companies in terms of setting an aspirational target for reducing overflows. And we decided we should link it to the duration of overflows. Other people, including the government, wanted number of overflows, but we felt at the time there wasn't a particular KPI that had been set, and we felt that 3 15-minute overflows was a lot less good than, a lot better than 1 5-hour overflow. So we did it in terms of duration. Since then, the government has set a target of 10 overflows on average by 2050, and all the targets are being set in terms of number of overflows. So we've now reworked our targets, and we're going to get a 24% reduction by 2030. But when we talk about on average, it's quite important to recognise the influence of the weather. These discharges are driven by rainfall. And in a wet year, going to be a lot more than in dry years. And we need to be careful we don't set ourselves up to be heroes when it doesn't rain and villains when it does. So the government have said that when we say an average, it's going to be over 10 years. So it's going to take some time for the numbers to settle down. But in response to your question of how were we doing against our original target, well, actually, last year, we achieved the 2030 target, but no hurrays, no clapping at that, because actually the reason we achieved it was a very dry year. So in fact, we got pretty much where we expected to be, given the weather that we had. But in terms of the actual duration, which was the target we set, we achieved it. So we've now got to make sure we keep achieving that year after year and get the 10-year average down to 10. Then we had a question on dry discharge, which I want to talk in a moment. And then we had questions about Bucklebury and Chapel Row. So dry discharge is a difficult concept because we haven't got yet a clear definition of what a dry day is. We're working towards it. The Environment Agency have a view, the industry are working on this. But the fact is that if a sewage works is discharging, it is because it is receiving more flow than it can treat. And it's receiving more flow than it can treat because of excess water in the system. Now, that ought to only be rainfall. But equally, in this area particularly, in the sort of north and west of the region, you've got a lot of chalk and limestone. And what that means is groundwater levels are high and you get infiltration into the network. And we have a lot of plans, which we'll talk about in a minute, to reduce infiltration. But the other point I want to make is that actually the polluting load that arrives at a sewage works is the same every day. We have the same number of customers living the same lives, eating the same diet. The variable is the amount of water. So when you have a big or sustained discharge, it is by definition very dilute because it's got lots of water in it, because what's coming from the homes is the same as it always is. So we have to also look at what are the impacts of discharges. And it can be that a small discharge can be much more damaging than a big one. And it all depends on the circumstances. So we're looking at all this case by case. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about sewage treatment in a minute, and I'll explain where the infiltration comes in. But in terms of Bucklebury and Chapel Row, we have got plans to expand both of those works. But in terms of foam, there's a very good Environment Agency leaflet which talks about the different causes of foam. And principally, if you've got brilliant white foam, that is generally detergent. And it can quite often be from a pop-up car wash or somebody who's put something down the drain somewhere. White foam is not generally coming, it may be coming through a sewage works, but it's not caused by the sewage works. If you've got brown or off-white khaki colored foam, that is a naturally occurring filamentous alga called nocardia. And it's caused by an excess of nutrients. And those nutrients can come from, yes, from a sewage works, they can come from agriculture. They're very prone to happen in the autumn as you get leaves decaying and putting nutrients into the water. So what we need to do is actually look at each particular case and say, has this been driven by the sewage works, or are there other causes? But if you see a lot of foam, you need to look at it, first of all, to see whether it's a man-made cause, if it's bright white, or if it's an off-white color, it's more likely to be natural. But yes, it's nutrients, and yes, that can be from the sewage works. So at this point, I want to apologize to all the people who know exactly how sewage treatment works, operates, and have been round or maybe even operated them themselves, because I think it's worth taking a proper look at it. This is Kintbury Sewage Works. It treats the waste of about 3,500 people in the villages of Kintbury and Inkpen, and it discharges into the Kennet and Avon Canal. So the sewage is pumped up to the sewage works from those two villages, each of which has a pumping station. And it's collected at the inlet works. And the inlet works is possibly the most important part of a sewage works, because if you get anything that gets through the inlet works into the sewage works, you can't get it out again. You can't stop a sewage works to clean it in the way that you could close a road or even shut an airport. A sewage works is 24/7 continuous process. So you've got to keep it really, really clean. And although, we're only required to treat pee, poo and paper, our lovely customers give us wet wipes, they give us nappies, they give us pairs of tights, they give us flushable loo brushes, they give us underwear, old socks, they give us condoms, sanitary products, all of which have to be screened out because they're not going to help the process. So they're screened out at the inlet works and they are collected up and they're taken away to landfill. We also remove grit because we get road runoff, and grit is really, really bad for pumps. So we take out the grit. From there, we put what's left, the liquid matter that should be coming in, we put it into a primary settlement tank. And what happens there is we just slow everything down. It's a mechanical process, and the solid material settles to the bottom of the tank and it's scraped off. We call that sludge, and it gets taken away for use in renewable energy. So what we've got left is reasonably clean, but it's had no biological treatment yet. So that's the next stage. The flow gets divided between three filter beds. And the filter beds do the same as aeration lanes in other sewage works. We're using what we call the good bacteria, activated sludge bacteria, to treat the incoming sewage, remove the ammonia, increase the oxygen levels, and make it much more fit to go in the river. Put it straight in the river, the ammonia levels are very high. These beds are full of a sort of a clinker, it's like a pumice, has a very high surface area, and the bacteria form a biofilm on the surface and take oxygen from the air, react with the sewage, and what comes out magically via a natural process after about 4 to 6 hours is pretty much good enough to go in the river. But it goes through another process. We put it into what's called a humus tank, and this is basically a final settlement tank. We repeat the process we did at the start. We slow everything down again, and the last fine particles, which is sort of talcum powder consistency, settle out to the bottom, and they're also taken away as sludge. And since we did this diagram, these pictures, there is an additional treatment process at Kinbury called tertiary treatment, and that's just above the right-hand number 2 there. It's been built, and what that does is it's a mechanical sort of cloth filter that gives the sewage a final polish because it's going into a canal, very low flow. We don't want any kind of solid matter in there at all. So it gets a tertiary treatment polish up. And then what's left goes into the canal, or in other works, it would generally be a river or a stream, but in this case, it's the canal, and that is clean effluent. Now, it's tested and it has to meet standards for ammonia, for suspended solids, and for biochemical oxygen demand. So all those things are measured. What it is not measured for, and what's not measured at any sewage works in this country, is bacteria. The sewage process, as it happens, reduces bacteria loads by a factor of between 100 and 1,000, but that still leaves quite a lot of bacteria going into the river. And that's because the standards for sewage works have been set basically to keep fish alive rather than to keep people healthy. So bacteria is something that we haven't sampled for. We're doing a lot more of that now because, of course, we have wild swimming and we have bathing waters coming on. So, and then the final point is number 5, the sludge gets collected in that tank there. The liquid drains out from it and goes back, is treated in the works again. And the solid material is collected by tanker probably every 7 to 10 days and taken to one of our sludge centres, where it goes through a high-tech anaerobic digestion process, and we generate renewable energy. And that is all fine when we get a standard flow arriving at the works, what we call dry weather flow. But because it's a biological process, there is a limit to how much you can put through the works at any one time. Push it through too fast, it doesn't get cooked. It'd be like taking a Sunday joint out of the oven after half an hour and expecting to eat it. You've got to give it the residence time for the biological process to work. So every works has a flow, a minimum flow, which is required to treat. And once you get beyond that minimum flow, any additional flow overflows automatically. No one pulls a lever, no one makes a decision. It's automatic, it goes over a weir and it goes into the storm tanks. And it's exactly the same as the overflow in a bath at home. At the point where the bath is about to overflow onto the floor, it goes down the overflow. So similarly here, at the point where the works is about to be overloaded, it goes into the storm tank. And in fact, in this case, it goes into one storm tank and then into a second one. And the aim is that the additional sewage is basically parked in the storm tanks for a few hours until the additional flow coming in drops down and you've got spare capacity at the inlet works, and then pumps start automatically and the storm tanks are emptied back to the inlet works. And there's no harm done. You've just given yourself a bit of breathing space to sort out the extra flow. The problem comes when you've got the works at full capacity and the storm tanks full, and you've still got sewage rushing in the door from those two pumping stations I talked about. So at that point, there's very little you can do. You could switch the pumps off in the two villages and flood the villages. You could put sandbags around the tanks, but eventually the flow is going to get over them and run overland into the river. So at that point, provided that you are treating your required flow and you filled your storm tanks, and this is due to rain or snow melt, you're at that point allowed to discharge into the river. So what is discharged has been screened at the inlet works. It's been settled in the storm tanks. So you've got a good deal of the solids are settled out in the storm tanks, but it hasn't had any biological treatment. And who were going back 4 years, 5 years ago, I'd be saying to you, that's the way the system was designed. We don't like it. We know you don't like it, but actually that's what we have to work with. A couple of years ago, we changed that completely. We sat down with Sarah Bentley and agreed that this was not acceptable to us, certainly not acceptable to customers, not acceptable to the environment, to put any untreated sewage into rivers ever. The question then is, what are you going to do about it? How long is it going to take? What's it going to cost? And what's the order of priorities? And those are discussions we want to be having, and indeed we are having. But let's look at why the flows go up. It's not because people are taking any more showers when it's raining. It's because excess water is getting into the system, and it gets in various ways. The most obvious one is infiltration. You can see on the left there, water is infiltrating into the sewer from between cracks in between individual sewer pipes. If you can find it, then that's a relatively easy fix. But if I give you a typical example, a sewage works that treats the waste to about 40,000 people will have 200 miles of sewers. So you've got to find that infiltration. The other problem is you can only find it when it's happening. In dry weather, there's nothing to see. And once it's been wet for a week, the sewers are full, the camera can't see anything either. So you've got quite a narrow window of opportunity to find the infiltration, work out where it is, and then plan the fix. The other thing that is a big problem to us is misconnections. So outside of central London, in our area, well, actually just a few very small areas in the centre of old towns like Reading, you've got 2 sewers outside every house. There's a big, it's actually blue in that diagram, surface water sewer, which takes what comes off the roof, off the drives, off any patios. That's clean water. Want to get it into the environment as quickly as possible, goes into a surface water sewer, doesn't get any treatment, doesn't need it, runs off. And then you've got the foul water sewer, which is much smaller. And that takes everything from the house. So yes, we think of sewage, we think of toilets, but it also takes water from showers, baths, washing machines, dishwashers, everything from the house. And that's a much smaller network, the orange one there. The size difference is greater than is shown in the picture. And the problem comes that if somebody has mistakenly, or to save money, connected something that should be in the surface water sewer into the foul sewer, it's taking up a lot of capacity that we really need for the foul sewage. And then you get excess flows in the sewers, which means either they overflow or you get the sewage works inundated. So we spend a lot of time trying to find misconnections and sort them out. And the problem, of course, is that most homeowners don't know about the problem. It may have been done by a previous owner. It may have been done by a builder. The misconnections is a big issue. We also have what we call inundation, which is where the water is running down the streets and going into a manhole cover. Sewers are not hermetically sealed. They're not airtight. If they were, they wouldn't flow. And they would also very quickly, in the absence of oxygen, really kick up very foul odor. So if you look at that picture, you can see in the edge of the manhole cover, you can see two slots, which, yes, you can use for lifting the manhole cover, but they're also designed to allow it to breathe, but they can work in the opposite direction and water can run down into manholes and into the foul sewer. And then on the right, we've got something that happens, I'm afraid, all too often, physical damage. This is actually in Buckinghamshire, so nobody in West Berks need worry, but it's under a town centre and the council have been putting in electric charging points. And that orange pipe there is a sort of stabilisation point. They just drilled it straight down. Nobody bothered to look, see if there's a sewer there, didn't look at the maps. And that was infiltrating water into the sewer until we found it with a camera. So there's quite a lot of that goes on. And finally, we have a situation where we have people making unauthorized connections. A farmer who has a wet corner of his field, somebody has a car park that's flooding. Let's get rid of that. There's a pipe there. We'll knock a hole in it, connect it up. And it's a nice, easy fix for them. It's a big problem for us. So before I go on from there, I just wanted to ask Karen to talk a little bit about, from a practical perspective, about finding and fixing infiltration. What do your guys do?
Okay, so my team are out in the field. We're the front line for Thames Water, and lessons learnt from 2012, 2013, when we had some wet weather. There are improvements. It's good to learn and move forwards. Unfortunately, after we learnt those lessons, we had a dry spell. We couldn't put anything into practice. But since 2019, when the next wet wind came along, we restructured. We went out and we're very, very targeted. As Richard has already described, there's a very small window to find some of this infiltration. You have a window around now. There are some areas we're already monitoring out there. You'll see some of our people in the high vis lifting covers, looking in, and people might think, what are you doing? We're keeping an eye on those water levels in our sewers, so we can see it rise. As it rises, there's a peak period where we can put cameras into the pipes and see where that infiltration is coming through the natural joints. Once it's surcharged, we have ways we can do it. We've got some technology we use. It's quite labour intensive and it's a risk because we have to manage the flows. We can put balloons, stoppers in the line to hold flows back so we can camera the downstream and see where bits are coming in. We need tankers then to manage that flow upstream, etc., to stop flooding and discharges. Following that, we manage those flows all winter. We prevent as much as we can everything escaping to the environment. The teams monitor it constantly. We also, in the background, we monitor the groundwater levels and the Environment Agency gauges to see where are we. So we can quite often predict when we're heading towards that wet weather period. In spring, every area changes as well. So I should say Thames Valley's got 243 catchments. Every catchment performs differently. It depends on the geology. Some of my areas up in the north respond sooner this side of Christmas. Down here in the Chalk Valley, Lambourne, etc., is more sort of January, early to mid-January if it's going to go. This year, we did get a peak in January and it recovered and we all breathed a sigh of relief, but actually then March happened, and what a month that was. The weather that hit the area, we saw the graphs go back up, which we hadn't seen a double peak previously, and that carried through to April, and there were some areas we were still managing right through to May and June. So it is really hard. We go out, we go and find what we can during the periods we can, and then from May through to now, we've been busy delivering on that work, getting the funding through the business, through our governance that we have on how we spend our money wisely, make sure we tackle the best places we can, do the lining, do the manhole sealing, including the chambers. Manhole chambers are made of brick and mortar, and the pressure of that groundwater getting in is incredible. You just would not believe how much water can get in through a manhole wall. So we do all that work all summer, so we get no rest, and then we go again. It's a real iterative process. And by doing those iterations, the following year, you actually focus in on somewhere else because you've made an improvement, which is brilliant. But what you do is build capacity for more leaks to open up or more water to get in from another source. So it is a very, very cyclable process. We've made some brilliant progress in some of the areas. I'm really proud of the team, how they work. One extra thing I would add to how flows get into our network is around private pumping as well, which is a natural reaction. You want to protect your property. Water's coming out of a river, it's burst its banks, or you can see it flooding around your property. Natural instinct is to protect it. We come across people pumping from gardens straight into a manhole. It's a convenient place. I'll lift the lid, I'll put it down there, it'll be okay. It won't be okay because it's not going to flood you, but it's going to flood your neighbours or your local community or come out into the environment, which we don't want. We'd rather know about it because we can then tackle that and keep everything separate. So thank you, Richard.
Right, thanks very much, Karen. But I said that we wanted to deal with and greatly reduce the discharges of untreated sewage because we regard them as unacceptable. So there are 4 things we can do. The first thing, as Karen hinted, is to direct the surface water right away from the sewers. So it actually manage it better. The second thing we can do is we can stop the infiltration by lining the sewers you've seen there, by rectifying the defects, by sealing the manholes. Those 2 things are important. You're dealing with the problem at source. But in the past, they've been quite uncertain. We spent a lot of money on tackling where we thought infiltration was happening, only to find it made very little difference. We're getting better at that, and I'll come back to that in a minute. At the sewage works, there are 2 things you can do. One is you can build more capacity. Very easy to build a bigger sewage works. The problem, though, is that you then have a works that is inefficient for most of the time. It'll be like me buying a minibus to drive to the station every day on the grounds that once a month I was going to bring some people back for a party. It's just too big most of the time. And the thing about a sewage works is you can't just switch bits on and off because it's a natural process. The bugs have to grow and settle. So yes, you need to expand sewage works, but it's not an instant panacea. And the final thing you can do is you can build more storm tanks. And the general reaction when you talk to people in public about this is, why wouldn't you? Why not just build loads of storm tanks? Well, if you're trying to deal with the kind of flow that you get after a really big summer thunderstorm, yeah, storm tanks are great. If you're trying to deal with infiltration that's happening day after day, you'll just keep filling storm tanks. Filling storm tanks is dead easy. Getting them empty is really difficult. And the longer the sewage sits in the storm tank, the more black and septic and odorous and horrible it becomes. So storm tanks are a short-term expedient. And yes, in some cases, we do need to build bigger storm tanks, but you have to build them. You have to keep the capacity of the works increasing in line with the storm tanks. So really, for each individual situation, you're looking at those 4 things: managing the surface water, dealing with the infiltration, building a bigger works, and or fixing storm tanks. But while we're doing all this, we think it's really important that people should understand what's going on. So this is something that I mentioned we were going to do last September. I'm not sure anybody thought we actually would, but we put a live map, which many of you I know will have seen, which shows where discharges are taking place. Green means no discharge in the last 48 hours. Red means discharging now. Amber means there's been a discharge in the last 48 hours, but it's stopped. And I was asked about how we're going to improve what's on the map. And the team that did that, and I think we've had, some people may disagree, but we've had really good feedback about the usability of it. People understand it, they find it helpful, and a lot of people have it on their mobile phones and they can quickly look to see whether their local works is discharging or not. The same team that did that have done our Report of Pollution Online app, which I'll talk about in a minute. But when they've got a breathing space, there's 2 things I want to do. The first thing is I want to be able to have a cumulative record of what's happened in the current year so far, because you can find all the previous year's data, all verified and reported to the Environment Agency. That's on the website, but you can't see we're now in October. You can't see what the cumulative total is for October. The other thing is knowing what's happened in the last 48 hours is quite useful, but I'd like to be able to go back a week. So if you really wanted to be safe, you could see exactly when there had been discharges or not over the course of that week. In terms of what we're delivering, so this is a picture of Kintbury Sewage Works, a very different picture to the one I showed you. Since the photographs that I showed you, it's been upgraded at a cost of 2 million. New inlet screens, replacing the hydro brake, which is the key part that allows the right amount of flow and spreads it around the works. Improved telemetry so that our control centre in Reading has got more information about what's happening. We put in the new tertiary treatment plant, that's the mechanical cloth filters, and a new pumping station. So you can see all that's gone on at Kintbury. At East Shefford, the construction's in progress now. That's going to cost more than 10 million. That's phosphorus reduction and improved flow to treatment. Hungerford, there's £5 million of works nearly complete to improve the ability to treat flow, increase storm capacity. And some of these schemes have started, some will start in the next year or two, but approved schemes at Aldermaston, Beanham, Bucklebury, Burfield, Chapel Road, Cheveley, Compton, Hampstead, Norris, Newbury and Pangbourne. And there are actually one or two more. But if you go on our website, you link to the map that I just showed you, it will tell you what our plans are for each of the sites and when we expect things to happen. And of course, dates change and we keep that updated. In terms of planning for the future, we need to look at both drainage and wastewater management together. Two of them, they've been done separately in the past. And we've typically only had 5-year plans. Looking at water resources, drinking water, we've always had 25-year plans. Now we're doing 25-year drainage and wastewater management plans, but recognizing that this is an activity that involves lots of different agencies, we've co-created our plan with local authorities and other stakeholders. And it shows what we think collectively we need to do over the next 25 years. And then, of course, that gets broken down into the 5-year business plan cycles, and that's when things get confirmed and put in the plan or not. So that plan is there to look at. It's on our website, and it has sections for each area, so you'll be able to look and see what is happening in West Berks. And we were very involved with council officers putting that together. In terms of, I talked about the targets we're now doing with the government's aim to get down to an average of 10 a year by 2050. We think we can get to maximum of 24 spills by the end of this period, and then down to 17 by 2030. And you can see the glide path there down to 10. You can also see how wide the gap is between, at the top there is what we'd expect in a wet year, the orange dotted line. The bottom orange dotted line is what we'd expect in a very dry year, and where we think the average will be over 10 years is the grey line in the middle. So it is going to move about year by year, but that's the glide path that we expect to be measured against by the government as well as by our stakeholders. We had some questions from Pang Valley Flood Forum about groundwater infiltration in Hampstead Norris. More about, from you, Madam Chair, about impacted system management plans, sewer lining, and Councillor Shakespeare, what works have been done to stop infiltration. So, I mean, many of you will know this. Here's the geology, and you can see the north and particularly the west is where we've got most of the infiltration in the chalk. And then we've got the lower Kennet and the Enbourne Valley with much more of a clay underlying. So the infiltration is quite localized. But I wanted to show this. This is groundwater levels at the nearest gauging station to Hampstead Norris. And the blue line underneath is how high the groundwater is. And you can see that in left-hand side there, that's January to April 2021, we had very high groundwater. And then it dipped right down into 2022, which was a dry year. And then it's been climbing again this year. And those amber and red lines are calculations that we've done. So we think that when the groundwater gets to the amber line, it's likely that there will be some spills from Hampstead Norris. When it gets to the red line, there certainly will. So that's the challenge for us, to get infiltration right down. And that shows it also shows that not everybody kind of gets this, but you would expect that some people would expect that groundwater levels are going up at this time of year because the summer's over and it's starting to rain again. But there's a big time lag in the system. So actually, October, November, December is when groundwater levels are typically at their lowest. It's when flows in chalk streams are at their lowest. And that's why it's the perfect time for us to get our contractors in and get started on work to deal with infiltration. So I'm going to skip over that one. So what we're delivering, Hampstead Norris, we're actually starting, I think it's either this week or next week, sealing manholes, installing low leak covers, and lining 2 kilometres of high-risk sewers. What we do there is we pull a plastic sleeve inside the sewer, and then we heat it up, and it molds itself to what was there previously, and gives us a sort of leak-proof long sock inside the sewer. Stanford Dingley, 400 metres of leak-tight lining, 15 manholes. Work has started there, I know. Aldermaston work starting this month. Compton was completed early in the year, and East Garston as well. So those are all part of the works that Karen was talking about. But I would also say that it doesn't have to be part of a major scheme to get these things fixed. If Karen's team go around and find the problem, raise a job and get it fixed. So it doesn't just sort of get stuck on a list until we're around dealing with it. Things do get dealt with on an operational basis, as well as these major capital projects that we can talk more about if anybody would like to when we get to questions. Update on the River Pang flagship project. And returning the Pang to good. So let's have a look at the River Pang. Now, the Environment Agency assesses rivers against their ecological status. And the aim is to get good ecological status, GES, everywhere. But it's a very rigorous test, and quite rightly so. It's what we call one out, all out. So you measure the ecological status by looking at which of the various factors is worst. It will be like an A-level student getting 3 A's and a D. Your overall assessment is D. And you can work as hard as you like to get the A's to A star. If the D remains a D, the overall assessment is a D. And as I say, that's absolutely right, and it's very rigorous. When the Pang got downgraded from moderate to poor, it was because one parameter changed, fish. The fish survey that was done showed poor. And that was in 2022, which was a very hot, dry year, and it may be the fish moved about. But the fact is that's what they found, and that's why it's been downgraded to poor. But what I want to draw attention to is the invertebrates, which is high quality, and the ammonia, which is high quality. And if we were having significant impacts from the sewage works, you wouldn't see high inverts and you wouldn't see high ammonia. So nobody, least of all me, is remotely happy that the Pang is classified as poor, but we need to understand why, and we need to be able to link impacts to what we can do about it. So there is a major upgrade going on at Hampstead Norris, and I've got a long list of all the bits of work that are being done that I'm not going to read out, but I'll happily send to the person who asked the question. So Hampstead Norris, we're both reducing the infiltration and we're improving the works. And the works there is a very large works for the population. And that's because it was sized to deal with the infiltration. So if we can deal with infiltration and get better performance out of the works, we should very, very rarely have any kind of a untreated discharge into the upper reaches of the Pang. And that will be really, really important. We also get questions about what's going on. So this is a photograph that a councillor, member of his family, took, I think, from the bridge in Pangbourne on the 21st of September. And it looks like, I think to some people, well, that's obviously sewage in the river. It's about 5 to 6 miles downstream of Hampstead Norris. But what we checked through on the right there is our live data that we get, the data feed from the sewage works. The top column is rainfall, and you can see there's a spike there on the right hand side that coincides with 21st of September. So there was 4 to 5 millimeters of rainfall. Not a massive amount, but I suppose you generally call it heavy rain for a short period. And then you look at the next one down and you can see that there wasn't actually a discharge. The red dotted line is the point at which the works discharges. And although it got pretty close with a calculated level, you can see in the red circle there, it didn't cross the line. We didn't actually discharge. The monitor didn't trigger. And at the bottom, you can see that the site has been treating consistently what it's required to treat. So what you've got in that picture actually is road runoff, fields runoff, all the other things that get into a river after heavy rain. And we tend to distinguish between agricultural runoff and road runoff. But if you think about it, what runs out of the fields runs onto the road. From the roads, it gets into the river. And that's what you've got there. So that's silt, not sewage. And this is where the live EDM map is helpful in showing people exactly what's going on. We had some questions about development. We were and have been lobbying DEFRA to implement what's called Schedule 3 of the Water Management Act. Now, believe it or not, that act was passed in 2010. And so we are 13 years later. The government still haven't enacted Schedule 3. As an industry, we've been lobbying them hard. The minister agreed to look at it again. They are now consulting on it, and they say they'll make a decision next year. So that'll be 14 years after it became law. Are we happy about it? I think you can draw your own conclusions on that. But certainly the whole of the industry has been making a lot of noise about that, because at the moment, developers have an automatic right to connect to the sewer, regardless of whether the sewer can cope with what they're going to put into it. So we can't insist that they take it somewhere else, and we do require planners can obviously be helpful. The Bockhampton Rising Main, yes, it can cope with 150 new houses. The reason it burst was it was corroding from hydrogen sulfide, and we've now fixed the main and we've stopped that corrosion happening. Developments adjacent to the Vodafone site. This is not actually surface water. This is foul water. Again, the developers under something called Section 42 of the same act, which also hasn't been implemented. And here DEFRA are saying, let's get Section 3 done first, then we'll think about Section 42. So that's going to be even more than 14 years after the act was passed. So there's problems there. I mentioned our reporting of pollution. We want people to report the pollution online. If and when you do, you'll get an opportunity to tell us what you've seen and where you've seen it. And we will get a crew there within 2 hours, day or night, 24/7. Usually they get there in an hour. And this is not a crew who just come and have a look. This is a crew who have all the kit in there in the back of their van to start sorting the problem out. So please, if anybody sees what looks like a pollution, doesn't matter whether you think it's a Thames Water pollution or runoff from a petrol station, whatever it is, call it in or report it online here. We will get a crew there and we'll get something sorted as quickly as possible. The bane of my life, and I suspect Karen's too, is people saying, oh, about 3 weeks ago, I think it was a Tuesday, and it was somewhere on such and such a lane, and we can't do much with that. It's no good, and it happens all the time. So please encourage people, get online. You haven't got to wait in a queue to have the phone answered now. Just send us the details, and we'll get onto it. So those were all the points that I was going to make. I'm just going to ask Karen whether there's anything I've forgotten or anything I got wrong, because you're at the sharp end of this.
No, the only thing I would add is I think there was a reference around defects in the pipes from where the infiltration gets in. Our pipes were never designed to be leak tight, realistically. So very, very few of what we fix is around a defect. It's about how that was originally built, because we never had the groundwater that we have today. It doesn't mean we're not going to take action on that. We're undertaking that action, and that isn't a lack of maintenance on my part, or my team's part, or Thames Water's part. It's actually, this lining is an enhancement of the sewer that has stood there and stood the test of time up to now. When people think that the sewers are broken and they're not operating, I just like to remember people to remember in some of these areas, those sewers are serviceable. They work from April through to at least November in the majority of the areas. They carry everyone's sewage away calmly, quietly. without any problems. Our problems come when that groundwater rises, which is something we are tirelessly trying to fix and make better, because we don't want that to happen either. But again, as Richard said earlier, I don't think people use their facilities more just because it's wet weather and it's winter. So it can only be groundwater and misconnections and all the other ways that that water can get into our pipes that's causing that problem. So long way to go, but we are certainly making brilliant strides in areas.
Thank you very much indeed. Very comprehensive, very grateful for that. Dave Willis, would you like to speak to us now?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting me today to speak at this session. So I'm going to cover two key subject areas as requested. Firstly, I will give an overview of the role of the Environment Agency in protecting and improving the quality of the water environment in West Berkshire. And then more specifically, I will give an overview of the role of the Environment Agency in regulating Thames Water. The Environment Agency's role in protecting and improving the quality of the water in West Berkshire is shaped by overarching plans, including the government's integrated plan for clean and plentiful water, which they published earlier this year, and also the Thames River Basin Management Plan. These set out the current status of the water environment, and they set objectives and priority actions going forward. West Berkshire is very fortunate in possessing important and precious chalk streams, including the Kennet and Pang catchments, which are internationally rare. Given this, the National Chalk Stream Restoration Strategy is also important in guiding the work of the agency and other organisations. Despite their importance, only 17% of chalk streams in England currently meet good ecological status. The ecological health of our rivers is not where it needs to be, and there's much work to be done to achieve the government's 25-year plan target of 75% of our rivers achieving good ecological status. The pressures on our water environment are diverse and complex. One key message from the various national and regional plans is that we need to take an integrated approach, and that catchment-based partnership will be the key, with all relevant organisations and sectors stepping up to the challenge. If we look at the current status of rivers in West Berkshire, the majority of the water bodies do not meet good ecological status. The key pressures are water pollution, both wastewater and also rural diffuse, physical habitat modifications, and changes to natural flows and levels. The Environment Agency has an important and diverse role in protecting and improving the quality of the water environment. Key activities for us include responding to serious environmental incidents, undertaking our environmental monitoring programmes, strategic planning, including that for water quality and water resources, determining relevant environmental permits and undertaking the associated compliance and enforcement activities, undertaking physical habitat restoration activities, and working in partnership, particularly with our catchment hosts. The reference to what you wanted me to speak on included environmental monitoring. In relation to the environmental monitoring that the agency undertakes, our programmes cover river and groundwater quality, river and groundwater quantity, that includes both flows and levels, and river ecology, including fish, invertebrates, macrophytes and diatoms. These are some of the key components of the environmental classification scheme that Richard spoke about earlier. In broad terms, our environmental monitoring programmes cover three categories. The first is proactive national programmes to provide consistent information across England, such as that used to classify the quality of our water bodies. We also undertake reactive local monitoring related to serious environmental incidents, and we also take proactive monitoring at a local level related to targeted investigations. The results of our national programmes are published via our river basin management plans and the associated Catchment Data Explorer website, where information is provided on each local water body. In terms of EA roles and activities, examples of our actions relating to water quality pressures include serious environmental incident response, including water pollution incidents, regulation of Thames Water, including our planning, permitting and compliance work, which I'll cover a little bit more in more detail later in my talk, and diffuse action plans and farm regulation inspections. Examples of EA work and actions relating to the water resource pressures, which are also key, again include our serious incident response, including, for instance, our response to last year's drought. Again, regulation of Thames Water's water resources activities, and also overseeing ongoing investigations into potential over-abstraction in our catchments. And examples of EA actions relating to the physical habitat restoration pressures. In relation to that, we have a very strong legacy of collaborative projects to restore river habitats in West Berkshire on the rivers Kennet, Lambourne and Pang. Those include a very wide range of river and wetland habitat restoration projects in partnership with a wide range of others. And increasingly, they now include natural flood management projects that are now an additional source of funding. If I turn now to the EA's role in regulating Thames Water. The Environment Agency's regulation of water and sewage companies is focused primarily on ensuring that the companies deliver their environmental responsibilities and covers three main areas. Firstly, the assessment and reporting of the company's environmental performance. Secondly, providing guidance on an assessment of plans to protect and improve the environment. And thirdly, the determination of environmental permits and the associated compliance assessment and enforcement of those. I'll take each of those in turn. In relation to the assessment and reporting of the company's environmental performance, the agency undertakes annual performance assessments, which are published each summer. The assessments cover several key aspects of water companies' environmental performance and result in a 1-star to 4-star performance rating, where 1 star is poor and 4-star is industry leading. Thames Water received a rating of 2 stars in our latest assessment for 2022, showing that the company requires significant improvements to its environmental performance. Performance on some aspects has declined since 2021, and we have particular concerns regarding the total number of pollution incidents, the high number of serious pollution incidents, and the delay to some key environmental improvement schemes. In relation to the guidance and assessment of plans, the EA's role includes the provision of advice to government on a range of water company plans, and also leading on the Water Industry National Environment Programme, so-called WINEP, which is a key part of the company's five-yearly price reviews led by Ofwat. The WINEP sets out the 5-year investment programme of schemes required to deliver environmental obligations. Water company plans, as Richard has said, also now include drainage and wastewater management plans, and also water resources management plans. And these are also vital to set out the company's future plans to protect and improve the environment over the next 25 years. As Richard has said, Thames Water very recently submitted their draft business plan for 2025 to 2030 to Ofwat, this includes the WINEP, which sets out the company's plans to improve the environment. These plans are critical to deliver key environmental improvements by 2030. The plan includes implementation of the storm overflows discharge reduction plan, where chalk streams are designated as high priority sites. The current position is that the EA will now review Thames Water's plan to assess if all relevant environmental obligations are included, and will advise government and Ofwat on the final plans, which are due to be determined by December 2024. As I said, the EA role includes determining appropriate environmental permits under the environment permitting regulations with conditions that control their environmental impact. It also includes undertaking appropriate compliance assessment and enforcement actions. In relation to Thames Water, we undertake a wide range of compliance assessment activities relating to the many environmental permits that the company have been issued. These include data return assessments, site inspections, and site audits. We have undertaken a range of enforcement action against Thames Water. For example, since 2015, we have had successful prosecutions at 17 Thames Water sites, with fines from the courts totaling in excess of £37 million. We also have a significant number of live investigations that are currently underway at a national and local level. This includes our largest ever criminal investigation into potential breaches of environmental permit conditions at over 2,000 sewage treatment works by all water companies. Our initial assessment indicates that there may have been widespread and serious non-compliance with environmental permit conditions. We are currently undertaking further investigations on specific sites. We also have ongoing investigations into the nature and extent of storm overflow discharges via the assessment of water company event duration monitoring data. All storm overflows are required to have such monitoring in place by the end of December this year. Our local investigation into the major pollution in Thatcham in 2020 is now nearing completion, and we will share information on the outcome and any associated enforcement action in due course. Going forwards, the Environment Agency is now creating a larger and more specialised workforce with some additional funding provided in the recent spending review to focus further on water company regulation, with plans to further increase our compliance assessment activities. In summing up, I think I would conclude the ecological quality of the rivers in West Berkshire is not where we want them to be. The issues facing these catchments are varied and complex, and there's no simple or quick solutions. Considerable investigation, planning, and investment is required to resolve them. Tackling the issues in an integrated way is vital, with all organisations and partners stepping up to the challenge. The EA will continue to work actively with our catchment partnerships to support this. The EA will continue to hold water companies to account to drive improved environmental performance in the sector, including increased investment in their operations and assets. We plan to increase our compliance activities and will take appropriate enforcement action in line with our enforcement and prosecutions policy. And finally, EA staff are highly committed and care passionately about protecting and improving the water environment. We will need to continue to prioritise our actions, and we know that we won't be able to fully meet all customer expectations on some issues, including, for instance, our response to lower risk incidents and also undertaking local environmental monitoring. These have been reduced due to reductions in government funding. We will continue to do all we can to make the case for increased funding to support our own work and activities to improve the wider environment. I hope my summary has been useful to set out the EA's position on the topics that were requested, and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Willis. Thank you to all of you for the presentations. Very comprehensive, very interesting. I'm now going to open it up to questions from members of the Commission. Who would like to go first? Councillor Burke.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. for your presentations. Oh, by the way, I had a message from Councillor McKinnon. He's unlikely to attend. He's stuck on a train. Perhaps that's a subject for a future commission. Just first of all, a question to Richard on for my understanding. You spoke about the difference between the foul water system and the runoff system. What happens if you spoke about runoff being connected to foul water sewers and that creating a problem? What if it's the other way around? What happens then?
That's equally bad and possibly worse.
Yeah.
Those misconnections would result in untreated waste going straight into the environment. So we have a specialist team that goes around looking for problems. Environment Agency reports some to us, local people report them, our own teams find them. And what we do is we find an area where we think we've got a problem. And then we have to actually send people out to put chicken wire over the end of pipes to see what they catch. And then backtrack up the pipe using dye down people's toilets to find out which property it's coming from. And then we have to ask them to fix it, because in many cases they don't know it was a previous owner or it was somebody they trusted as a builder who's done the misconnection. We don't have the powers to enforce. About 90% of people will do the rectification voluntarily. Otherwise, we have to go to local authorities because they have the enforcement powers. But it's a significant problem. I mean, if I tell you that in one part of outer London, we found a 16-bedroom hotel where everything was connected, including the toilets, into a surface water sewer. So, you know, the other problem is you might think you could go to an area and blitz it and it would all be sorted. I wish. We then have to go back 3 years later because the problem will be nearly as bad again, because you've still got DIY people getting it wrong. You've got builders taking shortcuts. You've got people not knowing what's going on. So we do work quite hard on education, but it is a problem. I have to say it's more of a London and suburbs problem than it is in this area. But we do still find polluted outfalls, and where we do, we report them and fix them. But yes, misconnections both ways are bad for different reasons.
Thank you. You mentioned the 4 strategies that you're using to. Which of those would you say is gives you the biggest bang for your buck?
It honestly depends on the circumstances. So if we're looking at Hampstead, Norris, for instance, infiltration is undoubtedly the biggest problem there. If we can sort that, then the works is plenty big enough. But we've got other situations where, you know, there's been growth in the area and actually the works hasn't kept pace and we need to catch up, and that would be capacity. And then we have ones where, you know, after a big summer thunderstorm, they go to storm too early, and then we can build a new storm tank. So, you know, we do work with the Environment Agency. They have a view on this, which they let us know. Our own teams, Karen and her team, the Sewage Works teams, all this gets put together and we work out where can we make the most cost-effective interventions. But each works is slightly different. And it's not helped by the fact that we inherited our sewage works from local authorities. So they're all designed in different ways, depending on what the borough engineer thought was the right way to do it 40 or 50 years ago. So we don't have a standard model of sewage works.
Thank you. Where I live in Brimpton, in Aldermaston Ward, the pumping station at the bottom of, as you go down Brimpton Road, regularly is inundated during high rainfall periods with runoff from agricultural land and so on. And you respond by sending fleets of pumping Bowsers. And I understand that there are similar problems, perhaps Councillor Hooker would verify this, in the west of the district. And we're told that little can be done to get to the core of the problem because of the age of the pumping stations and the costs, etc. But maybe that's not right.
It is right.
Okay. Well, well, I'm not sure you agree there.
All right.
But my key point is, what is the impact of that? Because it's something that you're unable to deal with other than by intervention, which is costly and so on, and causes enormous inconvenience, I must say. What's the impact on that sort of in terms of environmental effect?
Well, again, it's location specific, but we don't like using tankers, but using tankers is a lot better than the alternative if the alternative is to flood people's houses. So, Karen will deploy tankers where necessary, but we do also upgrade pumping stations, put bigger pumps in. Sometimes we build bigger networks, but we do have 7,000 pumping stations across the area, and we can't do them all at once. Karen.
So Brimpton is certainly an area that my team are very familiar with. We have been through it with a fine-tooth comb many a time. Just cannot find where this is getting in. We know there's something that trips it over. When it goes over, we do need to tank because we don't want to discharge the environment. The pump station from memory is by a pond area, so straight away it's too close to even gamble with. So we do want to flow manage with our tankers, etc. Other ways we do stuff is with over pumps to take the disruption of the tanker driving up and down the road, but there is nowhere to overpump to because it's a isolated village. We can't link it to anywhere else to discharge. So they have to come, fill it up and take it away. We will be definitely out there again. I'm sure this winter, we will be keeping a close eye on it as levels rise. So we will be getting to the bottom of that one.
So I didn't want it to be too specific because I'm sure that there are wide problems. What is the wider impact, and what will your response be? Because it's clearly a problem with, I don't know whether it is the infrastructure or just bad luck, but it can't be the only instance, I'm sure.
So isn't it, like I was saying earlier, the infrastructure works the rest of the year. There is nothing wrong with the infrastructure until either the groundwater is finding its way in somewhere or someone is pumping something into the network. There are some avenues we are looking to explore because we have come across multiple areas where just the act of someone with what appears to be a small pump pumping into our network can push everything over that threshold. No one does it visibly. We've found them in basements. We've found them in back gardens. They're tucked away because deep down, I think people know that's not the right action to take. We will go out. We like working with the residents. We have a number of flood forums we're part of. Gone are the days where we think we know everything. I like to think we know most things about our pipe and how the pipes operate. But in terms of where people see water congregating, whether it's on a road where there's a puddle after any storm, fields that are flooded, we need to know because we might have some assets that are sat under those puddles, which is again through the manhole covers, a lot can get in through. So really would like to work with any locals from Brimpton who have some more insight into what they see, how things evolve, and we can work in partnership, definitely. That's been successful in other villages, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Pattenden.
Thank you. Just a couple of observations and then some questions, if that's all right. It strikes me that the balance you spoke of, Richard, with how much capacity there is in the system in Kimpbury, for example, as you described, is completely wrong at the moment, without doubt. And that's why, there's so much ill feeling towards what's been happening with sewage being pumped into rivers. That's a view that, in my opinion, really has to change at Thames Water. A specific question, you might know that in May of this year, the administration of this council changed. The new portfolio holder for the environment tells me, he's not here today, couldn't make it, but he tells me that through the officers, he's been trying to arrange a meeting with Thames Water since May, and he hasn't been able to do that yet. So I wonder whether you could facilitate that as soon as possible, please.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. And those requests generally come to me first. So I don't know, something's gone wrong, but we will make it a priority to meet with the new environment portfolio holder. I mean, it's a no-brainer to do that.
Absolutely, and he's been waiting since May.
Well, I'm very sorry about that, and we'll try and find out what's happened, but I certainly haven't seen that letter.
Thank you. Okay. I mean, there's been a shocking level of profit by Thames Water over a number of years. There's in the past, there's also been a shocking level of dividend payments made. And as well as that, there's been a shockingly low level of tax that's been paid. So your picture that you had there of how every pound is spent, I wonder whether you might do a new version of that takes into account profits and tax. I think that would be really useful to people.
Well, that is in that. It does talk about tax. We don't pay a lot of corporation tax because of the government's capital allowances scheme, which automatically deducts tax for capital expenditure. That's the government's arrangement, which applies to all water companies, in fact, all major infrastructure companies. That's for capital allowances. We don't pay tax that we're not asked to pay. But that document is accurate. And as I say, if you want more information, our Finances Explained will give you a lot more detail on that.
So there was, I think, £1 billion in pre-tax profits in 2022. No,
it was nowhere near £1 billion. I can get you what the figure was, but all of that money is actually being reinvested because no dividends have been paid to external shareholders in the last 6 years.
Reinvested because there's been serious underinvestment over a number of years.
Well, yes, but I mean, for 6 years, shareholders have said, we're planning for the long term. We will not take a dividend. We'll put everything back into the business because we need to turn around performance, both for the environment and for customers.
Well, I think, it's not just for me that you would have heard this, I'm sure. So you can appreciate that there's a significant level of dissatisfaction currently.
Yes, absolutely.
Can I ask Mr. Willis a question as well? The investment plans that were being described and the timescales that were being mentioned. I mean, you said before that currently the Environment Agency's view of Thames Water's performance is that it's poor.
It needs significant improvement. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds poor to me.
Poor is 1 star under our rating system. Thames Water are 2-star under the system.
Okay. So no, I accept the point that in terms of an official grading, it's what you're saying. But given the plans that were being outlined, the investment plans, etc., and the timescales, would those, in your view, make it better than need improvement, or how would you regard the outcome of those plans?
So I guess 2 elements really. Firstly is we've been saying for some time that Thames Water needs to increase the scale and pace of its investment to improve its environmental performance. And we certainly welcome the increase, we expected and welcome the increased scale in the plans that are being put forward to Ofwat. But in terms of whether what the outcome will be from that investment, it is simply too early to say. So the draft plans were only submitted to Ofwat last week. And there will be a lot of scrutiny on those plans, draft determinations by early next summer, and then final determination by next December. So we welcome and would expect substantially increased investment in the company's operations and assets to support improved environmental performance. Whether or not what they proposed is sufficient, we will be scrutinising through that due process.
Okay, thank you. So Richard, finally, I mean, what would you like the Environment Agency's review of Thames Water to be, and when do you think you're going to get there?
I'd like us to get to being a 3, if not 4-star company as quickly as possible, but we do have a big backlog to catch up on because investment levels have not been where they should have been over the last 10 years. But that is partly because of a strong focus from the economic regulator on keeping bills down. So bills have not gone up in real terms in the last 10 years. So there is catching up to do, but at the same time, the assets are getting older and expectations are getting higher. So there is a huge amount to be spent, and we aren't going to spend it all in the next 5 years. So it's going to take time, but what we've got to do is get the best possible outcome from this price review and then build on it for the next one.
Okay. So customers are paying more and service is not improving. That's what it.
Well, the service is improving. You want to improve it further, but expenditure can be ultimately the shareholders are borrowing the money and putting up equity to provide the capital to do the schemes, but they need to have a return on that. They're trying to pay pensions. If they don't get a return on it, they'll say, well, let's go and invest in airports or railways. You know, why do we want to be in water? So, you know, that's the challenge here, is to get the balance right, to get as much as possible for the amount of money available. We also have to understand that, you know, if we put up our expenditure by 40%, bills are going to go up a lot. So our answer to that is to invest a lot more in developing the social tariff, so that people who are least able to pay can get a significant reduction on their water bill. So we're going to get to more than 500,000 families who will be on a social tariff. And that will help, because it means that those who can pay will pay, and those who aren't able to will be supported. And that's what we're going to need to do to get the size of increase that we need for this price review period. But it's not a one-off.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on now. Councillor Dick.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to address myself to the main presenter from Thames Water. And don't misunderstand me, I would never be rude to a visitor, but I find that presentation irritating, amateurish. The slides are ridiculous. Nobody in the room can see them at all. We hear you're still leaderless. It felt complacent. It doesn't feel like an organisation that is so poorly graded, and you're not the only water company that face these types of problems. I felt you spoke derogatorily about your customers. And maybe I'm mistaken there, but that's what I felt. And if that's the example you're setting to your staff, that worries me. It worries me a great deal. We heard a lot about the problems. The reason there are people in this room, the reason there are people outside, we know there are lots of problems. We heard about the problems and the difficulties and whatever everybody else has done or not done, but we didn't hear enough about solutions. So let's ask you a simple question. Let's talk about the water environment, if you like. So all the aspects that we've just been talking about that are under your leadership and responsibility in this area. Choose the one that you would say is the most important for the community. Tell us how much better it's going to be exactly 365 days from today, and tell us the scale so we can know in a year's time whether you have re-earned our trust. Thank you.
There's a lot of things that matter to communities, and what's important from our perspective is to understand which ones are important to which communities and take them with us, which is the reason why we're giving a lot of financial support, considerably in excess of what they get from the government, to catchment partnerships. So we're working collaboratively with catchment partnerships to build the kind of collaboration that Dave Willis was talking about. And those partnerships are going from strength to strength. And we've got representatives of them here today, and they work with us. Now, we picked out 3 catchments at the beginning of this period, which we designated as smarter water catchments as a trial. And we put £3 million into each of those catchments as seed funding to build capacity and build a collectively agreed plan. And those were the even load, the chess and the crane. And we have just put a proposal to the Environment Agency and Ofwat, which has been accepted. That the success of those partnerships as measured independently means that we're going to do another 11. So we have 27 catchments across our region. We have 3 smarter water catchments at the moment. We want to increase that to 14. And that gives everybody in those catchments a voice and an ability to influence what happens collectively to rivers. Because whilst water company activities are a very significant impact on the water environment, they're only responsible for about 1/3 of the total. Maybe the biggest single one, but there's a good deal of agricultural runoff, highway runoff, in some cases industrial contamination, all of which needs to be tackled. In rural areas, we have a lot of people on septic tanks. Those septic tanks aren't always very well maintained. That gets in the river. So there's a lot
Sorry to interrupt.
Excuse me, you asked me to answer your question. Can I just finish it?
One thing.
Yeah.
And
collaboration.
And choose it.
Collaboration.
No. One thing that Thames Water is going to lead on and produce good results.
We're leading on catchment partnerships.
No, that's not what you're going to do. That's what other people are going to do alongside you.
We are leading on catchment partnerships, and we're putting in money that other water companies aren't putting in to get results that other people aren't getting.
I don't accept that. but there are other people here who want to ask you a question. So you're talking about water quality in the rivers, yeah?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? So give us a scale. How, and I'm talking about all the rivers in West Berkshire. How will we know in 1 year's time whether your leadership, regardless of all your partners, has made an impact and how big it is? Tell me, please. It's a one-sentence answer.
Yeah, I don't think we can do that because each sewage works, each catchment, each bit of river is different, and we are improving them all in different ways. And we're setting priorities. So in some cases at Kintbury, the final effluent quality is improving because of the tertiary treatment. And in up Stanford Dingley, we've got the phosphorus scheme, which is going to make a big difference. But each one is different. The needs are different, and the expenditure is different for each sewage works.
But we need to see considerable progress in all of them, don't we? Will we?
Over time,
Will
yeah.
we?
Over time,
In
yeah.
a year?
Excuse me, can I just finish the answer?
What sentence?
Over time, yes, we will see it, but it will come at different speeds in different places. We have to set priorities. The amount of funding is limited. The capacity to deliver is limited. We need to allocate that money as efficiently as possible to get the best possible benefit as quickly as possible. So I'll give you a very good example. I think that Hampstead Norris Sewage Works will be in a much better place, both from infiltration and from treatment, by the end of 2025.
Thank you. I won't take up any more other people in the room. I'm going to write to you, sir, and I'll pursue this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take Chairman's privilege just to ask a question, if I may, before I go on to Councillor Mays. I know that at the presentation that you did last year, you talked about water connection charges for new houses and how you could offer a discount if the developer built water efficient homes. And I was just wondering whether any progress has been made with that. I'm conscious it's the kind of thing that we probably need to do in partnership with yourselves and the developers and the council as the local planning authority. So can you give us an update on whether any progress has been made with that?
Yeah, we're now offering those payments to developers and take up has been slow. I mean, they can get up to £1,800 off their connection charges if they deliver a fully water neutral house. At the moment, they're interested, they're talking about it, but the take up has been limited. So I think we do need to work together to push that through the planning system to encourage developers to take up that option and develop water efficient housing.
So what do you think we as a local planning authority could do to move that along?
Well, I think it probably, I mean, I'm not a planning expert, but I think probably through the local plan, it's something that you could ask developers to look at. Whether you can require it, I don't know. But it would certainly be something that we should be looking at with individual developers.
Okay, so maybe that's something we can look at between yourselves and our officers. Yeah, great, thank you. Councillor Mays.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Richard, I'm afraid it's mainly against Thames Water.
That's all right.
As you know, I've been involved with Thames Water and the Environment Agency and West Berkshire since 2000, when we've had some good discussions and got some actions done.
Yeah.
But if I can concentrate on Mortimer Sewage Works, it wasn't mentioned in your discussion at all. It's one of the ones that I noticed was missing. Do you have any plans for that?
Yes, we do. We have plans.
That side?
Yeah, we do have plans, and I'm just going to get it up on here and have a very quick look to remind myself. Both Mortimer and Burfield are due for upgrades. I'm just having a quick look at Mortimer. Just excuse me 1 second. It's on the website, and what it says is an upgrade is planned for Mortimer Sewage Works. This will improve its ability to treat the volumes of incoming sewage, reducing the need for untreated discharges in wet weather. The scheme will complete this year or early next. So there is work going on at Mortimer now, and I'll happily take you around to look at it, Jeff.
Yeah, I'd like to go. But
Yeah,
I can't
absolutely.
at the moment.
Yeah.
We got Burfield. What action there, please?
Burfield is a much bigger scheme because there's much more infiltration at Burfield, and that I think is, let's have a quick look. From memory, that's actually a £17 million scheme. Increased plan for Burfield include an increase in treatment capacity, higher quality of treated effluent, reduce the need for untreated discharges, expect the £17 million project to complete in 2026. It's also one of the areas where we're looking at the impact of groundwater on the sewer network. So we may be able to do some infiltration reduction work as well as building a bigger and better works. So it'll be a bit like Hampstead Norris. You should get the double whammy. Yes, we need to do both. I mean, Burfield is not a good performing works.
No, I gather that.
Yeah.
I went there in May, just
Mhm.
before the election, and at the Burfield site, it was flowing clean
Mhm.
water as far as
Yeah.
I could tell. I was downstream of the effluent.
Well, it would be fairly typical in May that it would, because you would have
Well, it
high,
was a dry period.
yeah, high infiltration, even though it's dry, and that would give
Because
you.
I'm a bit confused by that statement about where the water's coming from in that area.
It's
It's mainly a gravel, isn't it?
Yeah, but it comes from the previous year's
Well, I
groundwater.
realise that.
Yeah, so
The
anyway,
previous year was dry, of course.
yeah, but May would be when groundwater levels are quite high.
Yeah, but
And-
it is a gravel,
Mm.
mainly a gravel
Yeah.
geology in the surface levels anyway. But for both stations, do you, in your data on the map that you showed, the red
Mhm. Yep.
blobs on the map, does that include just water that's bypassed the sewage works, or does that include discharges that you send through the works to the local
The treated effluent, the treated effluent is flowing 24/7 regardless.
Of course, yes.
And so that doesn't trigger.
That doesn't
No.
trigger a
What
red blob.
triggers is an untreated discharge.
Okay, so that's a separate connection.
It's a separate discharge point in almost all
They are
cases.
separate pipes.
Sometimes
So
they
that
end up coming out at the
that
same
covers
point, but
two
they're
of my
separate pipes, yes.
Yeah. If I can just turn the page. No, that answers the two questions I
Good.
had on that side. I'm sure there will be others, but
Okay, well,
coming from this
yeah,
meeting.
okay, we'll get you
Thank
around
you.
Mortimer. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. But I would like to go there.
Okay, thank you, councillor Mays.
Thank you.
Councillor Gawley and then councillor Reid. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And first off, thank you folks for coming, because I think transparency is really important alongside collaboration to solve the challenges that we all have between the EA, the Thames Water, and local authorities and the general public as a whole. So thank you for coming tonight. I have to say, it feels a very bleak picture. I think if I was to choose a simple phrase, it would be bleak. And do I feel inspired that there is a plan to correct this going forward? I do, in a way, but I would challenge if there are any particular smart objectives that would align with that. So I look forward to hearing the kind of EA's appraisal on that business case to the plans that you folks have put forward for Thames Water to try and solve this. I would also just like to point out that it concerns me that you talked about the aspiration to be a 3-star business. Why on earth are we not just saying we want to go straight to 4, but on the route to 4, and aiming for that best in class accolade, really, I think is concerning. Moving on to some questions quickly. First off, I'm not an expert in geology, but I believe that chalk and limestone have been a part of this area of the world for a really, really, really long time, thousands of years. So it concerns me to hear that that's one of the biggest challenges we have. So that leads me on to one question really, which is the infiltration. That seems to be the biggest challenge to capacity. So if the root cause of the infiltration is predominantly around the geology of the area, that leads me to believe that it's either a lack of investment in maintenance or a lack of investment in capacity. Is that correct? If that is correct, how are we going to solve that?
It's very much case by case, individual works and individual catchments. I think it's important to recognise that we've only been monitoring and measuring storm discharges in a big way since 2018. So those discharges, and I've been fishing for over 50 years, those discharges will have been happening for a very, very, very long time. And anybody who's been around rivers knows that. But they are also, and this is not any kind of an excuse, they're also extremely dilute because it is mainly groundwater. We have works where the untreated effluent coming in is so dilute that it meets standards for treated effluent. That's how clear it is. That's why I said when Jeff is seeing a clear discharge, there's probably a lot of water in there. Now, how you keep that water out has to be looked at on case by case basis. It may be that in some cases you've got a kind of a natural spring that's gushing in, in some cases, I know I've talked to Karen before, and she said, oh, you know, we had a pumping station that was consistently overloaded. And one of the guys went and took a look in a big old manor house and found 2 big pumps in the basement. And we fixed that and never had to tanker since. So, you know, there are different causes for these things, and trying to generalize doesn't actually help. But in many cases, you have got to, if it's going to take you a long time to fix the infiltration, because you've got to find it, and then you've got to find cost-effective ways of doing it, you may need to build a bigger works as well. It's a belt and braces approach. But each site is investigated, right? We put a lot of flow monitors in, we work out where the flow is at certain times of the year, how it's getting in, which manholes we need to seal. It's really painstaking detail work, you know, literally meter by meter to get those sewers fixed.
So how do we speed that up then? How do we make this quicker? Because again, like I said, I don't feel confident there is a plan or a smart objective attached to this to solve this problem.
Well, there are smart objectives attached through the business plan, which say how many kilometres we will fix in a certain period, how many manhole covers we will do, and if we don't achieve those objectives, then we get penalties from the regulator. So, for instance, you know, we have set a target of getting pollutions down by 30%, and if we don't achieve that, there'll be penalties, and they'll be different if we get it down by 20%, or they, you know, there could even be rewards if we get it down by more, and not on that one, but on other metrics. So each of these has a metric that is in the business plan, which is signed off as an efficient use of customers' money. But getting it done faster, we're trialing new methods. So in this 5-year period, we've spent a lot of money testing new ways of getting infiltration down at 2 catchments. One's Bolton on the Water in the Upper Windrush. The other one is Chesham on the Chess. And we've used new equipment, new methods of working out just where are the most cost-effective places to make improvements. And we've had some really good results from that work. And those techniques are now being rolled out at Hampstead Norreys. They're also being rolled out at Clanfield in Gloucestershire, and we're starting investigations in Marlborough. I accept that those last 2 aren't in West Berkshire, but we're learning from that as we go, because it's very easy to spend money inefficiently. What we need to do is make sure that we're getting really good measurable results, so that we can say we invest this many pounds, we'll get this much infiltration reduced. But again, as I say, they do have to be priorities. We have to look at the different catchments, look at what we've got. Some of the very big catchments like Marlborough are going to take longer to fix than Hampstead Norreys, which is actually quite a small catchment, or Clanfield. But again, if we can prove to the regulator that by spending that money with new techniques, we can make ground quickly, then we can justify a bigger investment case to do more.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Just one last question, really. It's a bit more kind of local to my ward, is that we have a significant development due to the south of Newbury at Sandalford, and it links into, I believe, the London Road pumping station. Can I ask for what is due to happen, or what works are planned for that London Road pumping station to increase the capacity to ensure that all of those areas around Newbury are kind of protected and we don't have overcapacity effectively?
So London Road has a history that, like you say, the pump station there pumps to the sewage treatment works, which takes the whole of Newbury. The rising mains run along the London Road, and we have had issues in the past, burst rising mains, etc. There's been an extensive amount of money spent on lining those twin rising mains from one point through to the works, and some replacement where some of that pipe had deteriorated so badly. It's the ground around the pipe and eating the pipe from the outside in. More often you might see it eaten inside out, but the ground has actually eaten away and corroded that pipe. So that work's been undertaken, and I'm pleased to say we obviously haven't had any more issues along there. However, so that addresses some of our asset health. So health has improved the area, but for Newbury, we also have flooding and growth to consider. Like you say, there is a project team looking into what does it mean, how can we do it. There is a plan to upgrade London pump station, London Road pump station. Literally this afternoon, I have walked with that team the whole route to understand where do we put it. That area, we've got plans showing big, open, clear expanses. Now it's a massive industrial area through various different car lots, etc. You've got the canal, the water courses, etc. You've got London Road, which I never really want to be on the London Road on the A4 because I know it causes a lot of headaches for a lot of people. So the route in itself is a challenge, but they're going to put together some options, price them up, also understand the implications. It's not always about the cost. It's around actually how much disruption is there to people when we undertake this work, and also future proofing for if we need to get to that asset. We don't, like I say, I don't want to be on the A4, or I'd rather go somewhere quieter. So that's going to be put forward. When that upgrade has happened, we believe that's going to alleviate some of the other flooding issues that are experienced in the area. But until we do that, whilst we have modelled the area, we need to do that piece of work. Then we can reassess, is there any smaller scale upgrades we need at some key pinch points?
Cool, thank you. Would it be possible to set up a meeting perhaps with myself and officers to get a bit of a clearer picture on what that upgrade looks like and perhaps some of the solutions and scenarios?
Early days and discussions, but absolutely.
Earlier the better, I think.
Yeah,
I talk about the spirit of collaboration, and I think the earlier we can have a seat at the table collectively, the sooner we can help support.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I've got a number of questions that have come in from residents of my ward, which is Bucklebury. One is quite local, parochial, and the other three are actually quite national level. So the first one to Thames Water is around Stamford Dingley. Thames Water undertakes sewer lining in the village, as you spoke about, Richard, in response to pressure from the parish council. Stamford Dingley Parish Council has written to Thames Water, Julie Moulton, stating, although the sewer lining is obviously a good thing, thumbs up on that one, informed opinion, and we do have an awful lot of retired, and you probably know them, experts in that area, is believed that the water ingress in the sewers further upstream due to cracked, broken sewer pipes towards Frilsham, not covered under the lining work, allowing an in-ground water ingress. If this ingress continues, there will be continued sewage flooding. And if the sewer manhole covers are tight, the exit will be out through residents' toilets. What assurance do the residents have that Thames Water have done sufficient due diligence to solve the issue and not make the situation worse for residents?
So the lining that's due in Stamford Dingley, I believe, is 400 metres of lining, which tick in the box. It needs to be done. So there might be some others in Frilsham. I can follow up. I will have a word with my team, go make sure we get some eyeballs on that. I'd like to think that's already been covered off, but we can certainly look into that. There's not going to be any detriment for doing the 400 metres. But with regards to the sealing of manholes, we are very careful where we do that, because quite often if people do see something surcharging, they want it bolted down. I'm like, no, that will push it into customers' houses. You always have to be cautious around where it's going to push that to. So there are different forms of sealing. So there is manhole sealing of the chamber to stop it coming through the walls. So that I need to come back to you to ensure I've got the right details. So the chamber walls is one way of sealing the manhole. That, again, won't be a problem. It can still surcharge if it needs to surcharge. It's the covers. I'm not sure whether, I don't believe from the description of manhole sealing that they're talking about sealing those covers. So it will still be able to escape, but I will certainly double check and come back to you to confirm.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you very much
No
for
worries.
that. The next question, Thames Water, is a bit more national. But also, well, will cover us. West Berkshire and us nationally see more and more increased deluges of rain as climate changes take hold globally and locally. It will not be possible to keep increasing emergency sewage stormwater capacity in every location. What is Thames Water and the Environment Agency doing to look at constructing more natural pollution defences to our rivers, e.g. rebeds to manage pollution events before it hits the river?
Yeah, this is where the drainage and wastewater management plans come in, because then you've got the company and the council and potentially local landowners working together to manage surface water in such a way that it doesn't get into the foul sewer and from there overflow either into the environment or to people's homes. But it's those drainage and wastewater management plans which we can send you a link to for the local area. But that's really, there's a lot of work about managing surface water has been done with councils, looking across the geography and the geology. Where is the low-lying land? Where could water be held potentially on farmers' fields? Where can we do this natural flood management, which we in the Environment Agency are very keen on? And where will there be landowners who will want to work with us on that, and councils who want to contribute too? But it's all part of a parcel with the changes in payments to farmers through ELMs and things that potentially they could be incentivized to use their land to hold water rather than letting it run off and potentially affect towns.
Brilliant, thank you for that. I think the next question, maybe I can combine the two. So it's to David. We hear that from the DEFRA Minister that fines are at record levels. However, there's been a steep decline in the number of enforcement actions taken by the EA against corporations since 2012. According to new research, the Good Jobs First violation tracker found a six-fold decline in enforcement actions by the EA over the past decade, with a decrease in both civil and criminal sanctions. Overall, there's been an 84% decline in enforcement actions taken against by the agency. Research also reveals a significant decrease in prosecutions against corporations. In 2012, they were just under about 300, 16 times more than in 2012, so a significant decrease. Civil actions have decreased as well, less dramatically, with a twofold decline. Of the 4,000 odd enforcement actions taken against companies during this 10-year period, nearly 60% did not result in any fine at all. In addition, the independent reports funding for environmental protection services provided by the government's EA has been cut by 50% over the past decade. Analysis shows, largely funded by the government, the EA has struggled to improve air quality, biodiversity, tackle water pollution, and better regulate farms and sewage works as a result of the cuts, critics say. According to analysis by Prospect, a trade union which represents professionals in the public sector, the government's grant for environmental protection is currently 56% lower in real terms than in 2010. Last year, the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, provided 94 million in funding for the EA's environmental protection services. So why is the record fine income not being used for greater enforcement? Sorry, a bit of a long one, that.
Yeah, so specific, perhaps a general comment. It's a specific and then perhaps a general comment specifically about the use of fines. I mentioned in my summary that, for instance, in relation to Thames Water, we've had over £37 million worth of fines relating to the prosecutions we've taken against the company since 2015. Those fines don't come to the Environment Agency, they go to Treasury. That's constraining news, but the positive news is that in the company's plan for water that they issued earlier this year, they're proposing to redirect environmental fines to effectively a national catchment restoration fund, so that those funds are available to be redirected at activities to improve our water environment. So historically, we've not been able to recycle fines into supporting our activities. In the future, I think there's a really positive opportunity for catchment partnerships to benefit from that source of funding. So that's on that specific. The agency does get costs awarded to it for prosecutions, the enforcement action that we take, and that money is recycled back to the Environment Agency and is used to support our operational activities. In terms of the broader view, I think we've made it clear that we have flagged that, and I mentioned again in my summary, that there are a range of activities, particularly those activities that are funded by government grant and aid, where we are under considerable pressure in terms of what we're able to deliver. And those include pollution incident response, environmental incident response, and environmental monitoring. There's 2 examples. And we've put forward cases to the government for increased investment in those areas through the spending review. We've had some additional funding provided to us, and we will continue to make the case for additional funding requirements from government to undertake and scale up some of our government-funded activity.
Thank you for that. Just one very quick one then. It's around citizen activity in the area, and we've got many of them here, and hopefully we'll hear from them very, very quickly. Is there anything that can be done, because they produce some really good quality work, especially things like Pank Valley Flood Forum, fantastic website. Is there anything that can be done for grants for these people? Because obviously the activity, software licenses, etc., and even monitoring for pollution itself all costs money.
So there is some funding from the agency through to catchment partnerships. Richard mentioned again funding from other sources, including water companies. I think in terms specifically around the sort of citizen science approach to monitoring, I think it's something that we and others are keen to pursue and develop as far as possible. There are various pilots and initiatives currently around how that is taken forward. We're reviewing our monitoring strategy nationally, and citizen science will be a key part of that going forward. But it's not an easy solution to for instance, the issues around how do we gain better access to collective data, have common standards around monitoring, etc. So there's a lot to work through. The other positive is I think there are some increasing options for funding for catchment partnerships, including, for instance, the one I mentioned around, relevant to your question, around DEFRA funding for natural flood management, which is another expanding area which is getting further support, and we should see more of that coming through on our plans in terms of how we progress and improve our rivers in an integrated way.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, Councillor Pemberton.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'd like to echo my colleagues' comments as well. And thank you guys for sort of turning up tonight and speaking to us, sort of putting yourself through the ringer. I'd like to talk about the money. Thames Water might not have paid external dividends, but in the 6 or 7 years since the current consortium has owned the company, it has paid internal dividends. And that's happened at a time when the company's debt pile has increased exponentially along with people's bills. Can you tell me what that dividend payment has been over that sort of 6 or 7 year period and how it's been justified?
I haven't got the figures here with me, but I'll happily write to you about it. It's in our report and accounts every year. That is money that is due to loans, to pay loans. If we didn't pay it, it'd be like not paying the mortgage. So, you know, it's not going to external shareholders. It's not paying any pensions. It's not boosting anybody's share price. It is simply going to satisfy money that is moving between companies and pay interest on it. So there's nothing secret about it. But the point about it is that the shareholders, who are mainly pension funds, are not taking any income from the company. So they're not getting anything that helps them to pay pensions from us. Yes, they're paying debt that they've got to pay. You have to do that, but there's nothing going outside to the shareholders other than for that purpose.
If I may, would it be fair to say that part of the reason for that moving around of money, call it debt interest or dividend payments or whatever you want, is partly down to the very complex ownership structure of Thames Water? I mean, a lot of Thames Water is owned by foreign companies and governments, for example. And do you not also think that that complex structure also raises questions about the motivations of your investors as well?
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I mean, they are all long-term investors. I think something like 2/3 are pension funds. The others are principally sovereign wealth funds. So they're all taking a long-term view of a long-term company. And that's why they're able to say, no, we won't actually take any dividend, unlike other water companies, which have been paying external dividends, in some cases, £200 million or so. So the relatively modest interest payments are a factor of the structure. But when you've got a lot of investors, it is complicated. I mean, it's grown over time. Have done some simplification, but I think the important point is that we're very happy to explain it to people. A lot of it's in the document, Our Finances Explained, but I'm very happy to take away your question about what those payments have been, and I'm very happy to answer any more questions you've got in writing. But I'll have to get help from financial experts, because I'm a biologist, not an economist.
No, that's a fair point, and I appreciate the offer for you to write to me after this meeting. One final question, if I may. If it was in the presentation that you gave to us earlier, and I've missed it, apologies. As I alluded to a moment ago, your debt pile does seem to be growing. It's increasing. You mentioned it's subject to fixed interest rates at the moment.
Yeah.
How long are those fixed interests liable to last?
Well, I mean, there are lots and lots of different bonds with different maturity dates.
Roughly speaking,
but in terms of, but we do plan well ahead, and we make sure we insure ourselves against inflation and interest rate rises. So we're managing the debt with some very expert people looking ahead. But in terms of the debt rising, yes, it is, because we need to spend a large amount of money. But equity is also going in, because if it didn't, the gearing rate would get too high. And gearing is actually coming down. So the challenge is to get gearing down more, while at the same time having more to spend. So it's a slow process, but gearing is at the moment coming down, not up.
Thank you. I have one final question, and then I'm going to see if our other councillor colleagues want to ask anything. In your presentation, Richard, you talked about a 30% decrease in the total number of pollution incidents by 2030 and a 28% decrease in storm overflows. But you also made a comment this evening about the fact that the government were keen for water companies to look at the number of incidents, whereas you would prefer to look at duration, because obviously the number, it could be for an hour or a week or...
There's a difference there.
Yeah.
The first one is that you mentioned is pollution incidents. So that's where something goes wrong, where there's a blocked sewer, a failure of the sewage works, and you get an immediate acute impact on the environment. The one I was talking about earlier was the storm discharges, where the government have a plan to get storm discharges down to an average of 10 for every outfall by 2050. And we've got the interim targets. So those are overflows of untreated sewage. The other ones are, but that's the system working the way it's designed to work.
Yeah.
The pollution incidents are the system designed working how it absolutely isn't designed to work. So blockages, power failures, things that go wrong, human error.
Yeah.
Those are the things that cause the immediate environmental impacts.
Yeah. So it's incidents. It's not duration, volume.
No. It is number of incidents.
Yeah.
So, I mean, two typical pollution incidents that Karen can probably talk about. One is a burst rising main. That's a pressurized sewer. If that happens, then we're pumping sewage out, which is really, really bad. And the second one, which can be equally damaging, is a blockage forming in the network. And a third one would be something going wrong, a mechanical defect at a sewage treatment works. All of those three things can cause an immediate and potentially severe environmental impact. So and we have a very detailed pollution incident reduction plan, which is on our website, and which includes the work we're doing on rising mains, on blockages, on sewage treatment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Other councillors, would you like to ask something? Councillor Hooker, I saw your hand first.
Thank you, Chairman. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presentation this evening. I'm Clive Hooker. I'm the ward member for Downlands Ward, of which East Garston sits, and you're obviously aware of the situations going on at East Garston. I live in West Ilsley, which is in the Chairman's Ward of Ridgeway. So I've got the River Lambourne in one ward and the Pang in the other. And I am a member of the Lambourne Valley Flood Forum and a member of the Pangbourne Valley Flood Forum. So that's where I sit, and a couple of questions really. I was interested in your explanation of how the sewage work, and if one's got a problem, if you work your way back to the problem, you could address that. So we've got the problem of, obviously, at East Garston in particular, of sewage being discharged, and they're not particularly of a long period of time, but they discharge. Now, looking at your operation and as a design engineer in the past, if you go to the crux of the problem of when it comes in too much and you've got this steady flow of material going through the plant, it then discharges to your sewage overflow tanks. Considering in that situation, I'm not saying we modify every one, but if you look at them piece by piece and say, well, if we put two more storage tanks in that position, it would delay double the time before we get discharge. I know there's an expense, but is there some common thinking that we've got a problem, and if we increase just the storage, it would solve the problem?
Increasing storage is the answer if you are trying to deal with a wet weekend or a big thunderstorm or an isolated wet period. Then the storm tanks, bigger storm tanks, will actually help. If you've got infiltration, so that there's more coming into the works than it can treat, day after day, all you will do is fill storm tanks. You'll never get them empty. So it's a balance between dealing with the problem at source and getting the infiltration down, building a bigger sewage works to have more treatment capacity, and potentially having more storage. And depending on the works, depends on the solution. But each one is carefully modeled through to make sure that we get the best benefit from whatever we're going to spend on it.
Okay. Well, my understanding was that as this slowly goes through and as it catches up with itself, then it discharges back into the system. So, I mean, I'm surprised that these tanks stay full for a long period of time that are a throughput system.
Yeah, it can only go back to the system when the system's got spare capacity. If the system is consistently over capacity in what's arriving, it never drops to the point where the pumps kick in to pump it back, because you'd simply be overloading the works again.
But as I say, these are only, they're infrequent. So it's not an ongoing operational problem. It's just at peak times, which are quite short and small discharge times.
But I think I'm right in saying that's one of the works that we are actually increasing capacity.
Yeah.
And what we'll do is we will have modelled it, and we will have decided that particular works, more capacity is better than bigger storm tanks.
On the point of incoming surface water through sewage leakage, can you tell me what you're doing, or what your limitation is, if that's the word, for private sewers? Because obviously I didn't realise till I got involved with these forums how many private sewers there are and how many problems they're causing. So it's pointless, I don't say pointless, it's helpful to repair all those sewers which belong to Thames Water, but you're still getting considerable influx from private sewers, and what are we going to do?
I'm going to ask Karen to deal with that one.
So thank you. So in East Garston, it was one area you've mentioned. We've already got some work planned and delivering to improve, but that's also upstream of there. We've got Eastbury, and we've done a thorough investigation. And what you've just highlighted is something that we've identified in that area. So we have got some areas we'd like to go and seal in Eastbury, but equally we have a number of properties and points of interest where we are getting disproportionate amount of flow from private pipe work, laterals, etc. For every, for all the kilometres of sewer we've got, as you've just alluded to, probably the same exists, particularly in more rural areas where houses are naturally further from the road, etc. There's a lot of vulnerability there. So we have started to look into this. Now we've got our own sewers in hand, it feels like, particularly in the Lambourne bit, which goes to Bockhampton. I know we've got more to do in Eastbury and East Garston, but bear with us with that. We are working on it. But we've now uncovered that we've done our work on ours. What extra do we need to go to? We will look into these privates. There'll be, we are looking to issue letters, a little bit like the misconnections. highlight to
Owner's
customers.
responsibility.
Yeah, highlight
Okay,
to the
thank you.
customer they've got that issue, and then go back and investigate and see has it been addressed.
Thank you. One thing you didn't mention, Richard, and that was the pumping of surface water of rising flood water. And if I go back many years now, in the days when Didcot Power Station was operational, Compton Animal Institute was operational, the Harwell operation was going on there. We didn't seem to have in those days this problem maybe of this rising surface water, because I guess we were pumping out and quite a bit of water was being sent to these places and keeping those levels down. I mean, are we pumping rising water? And if so, where is it going? Did it used to not go down to the Thames?
I'm certainly not pumping any rising surface water.
Okay.
So what the pumping of surface water, etc., that I was talking to about earlier was around customer action on seeing water coming near properties and putting it into our foul. So if we go back to the presentation earlier, you have a large surface water pipe, which is supposed to take all the rainwater, groundwater away. And then you have a much smaller foul sewer, which takes the other facilities away. Unfortunately, convenience, there's often a manhole available and it goes into the wrong pipe, which eats up that capacity.
Okay. Question for both of you, I think, is a bit of a cheeky one. That should we possibly be considering fining the CEO of Thames Water for these breaches? It might just focus the mind on the company to act a bit sharper. Any thoughts?
I mean, you can always find people, and it may or may not make a difference. I worked very closely with Sarah Bentley in the 3 years that she was here.
She's gone.
I regularly got emails from her at 5 a.m, and then I get another one at midnight. She was working absolutely flat out to try and solve the problems. And I'm quite. Our interim CEOs are doing the same. I'm sure nobody wants to come. Nobody comes to work to do a bad job. And I'm just not sure. I mean, imposing fines might make people feel better, but if you actually want to improve performance, I don't think it's going to make much difference.
Thank you,
It's my honest opinion.
Thank you for your answers. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Shakespeare.
Thanks very much. And I'd just like to reiterate what my colleague said. It's a very hard day at the office to come here and try and defend something that's to many of us seems quite indefensible. So thank you very much for doing your best. This first question for Karen. And thank you very much for explaining the difficulties in finding the sources of infiltration inundation. It was very interesting and very clear about how that would be very difficult to be able to effect a repair if you're still searching for the source. In this, and I should add, sorry, I'm the councillor for Pangbourne, and so you'll forgive me if my questions are very parochial and Pang focused. So in the very snappily titled Groundwater Impacted System Management Plan, Hampstead Norris River Pang. It details in great detail every manhole cover that needed to be sealed, the different sewers that needed to be lined back in July 2021. So whilst I'm really glad that work's going to start now this October, haven't we missed a real opportunity to affect the situation earlier and to stop I think it's 1,200 hours of discharge from Hampstead Norris into the Pang this year?
So with the work that's planned in Hampstead Norris, I believe that's going to be delivered before the winter, as far as I'm aware. So we should be ahead of. If it was a different part of the region, I'd be nervous about doing some of that work this stage because groundwater will start to creep up in other geological areas, but down in these areas, we have still got time to do that. Yeah, I'd love to have done it earlier in the year. Our groundwater is behind in terms of receding. We are still above where we were this time last year. I am, if I'm brutally honest, nervous about this year if it was a wet weather on top of where we're already at. But then we are the same position where we were 2 years ago, and we got through that year, and we did. I'm super proud of my team, and for whatever people think of the big Thames Water, my team worked tirelessly, passionate, and own all these issues. And I'm proud of where we've got to because I'm a small team. but we have focused in the right areas. And so to get to this point with Hampstead Norris, which has been a long time coming, apologies for the delay in that. We have about 62 areas, whether it's a village or whole catchment, that we keep our eye on over the winter period across the region for many different reasons. Some are flooding internally, some flooding externally, some more pollution related, risk to rivers, etc. We have to prioritise our resources to get around everything and get the best results to give us a good summer's work to do to deliver before we go again. And we've got there. And apologies, it's taken some time, but I'm confident we're going to deliver this work. Whether it resolves everything, proof is in the pudding. We'll see. The good thing doing it now is we'll see how it acts over the winter. We may learn more. We might have to come back again in the summer next year and deliver some more. We'll be monitoring it. Okay.
Thanks very much, Karen.
No worries.
And a question for Richard. You highlighted the Environment Agency report on the ecological status of the Pang and it dropping from moderate in 2019 to poor this year. And I think you admitted that in 2016 it was rated as good. And so this has been a progressive deterioration. And I think you mentioned that you thought one of the reasons that the drop from moderate to poor this year was fish moving around.
That was, well, the only change this year was the fish survey, which was poor, and therefore the overall result comes down to poor. And next time, if the fish is moderate, it'll go back up to moderate as long as everything else is still moderate. But my point, the really important point, was that if you are looking at what is going on in a river, and all the things are important for good ecological status, it's a very rigorous metric. But the ones that are most closely linked to sewage discharges would be invertebrates and ammonia. And both of those are high. So I'm not saying that Hampstead Norris doesn't have an impact. I'm not saying that these discharges aren't unacceptable. They are. But to try and link that to the change from moderate to poor, or to talk about an ecological catastrophe in the Pang, as some people have done, is wrong. It's not good, but we need to be very clear about how the metric works and understand it so that we can then understand what needs to be done to put it right.
What impact do you think the 17 serious water quality pollution incidents in the last year, the worst since 2013, which was in the Environment Agency report, had on the status of the fish?
Given that the invertebrates are high and ammonia is high, I would say they were minimal. I'm not suggesting that those discharges are in any way acceptable. They're not, and we need to sort them out. But to try and link cause and effect is really important. And when you're looking at a river, and you're looking at the impact of sewage, the first two things you would look at are invertebrates and ammonia, and both of those remain high. So we can do better than that. And let's hope that the fish do come back, or that we find out what's happened. But there was one sample at one site, which, because this metric is so rigorous, downgraded the whole river to poor. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I hope you're right, and I hope they do come back to you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marsh.
Time is getting on, Chair, so I'll restrict myself to just one brief general question. I was slightly taken aback with what you said about bills, because, and no doubt the other members or the members of the public who sat here patiently for more than 2 hours will tell me if I'm wrong, but my experience as a consumer has been a prodigious rise in the bill every year since I moved into my current house 15 years ago, and it's not got any better in recent years, and this is despite low inflation and low interest rates for much of that time. I mean, but did you say that it hasn't kept pace with inflation, or your?
What I said was that bills are at the same level in real terms now as they were 10 years ago. Now, if you're on a meter, that might be a factor. But I'm very happy to give you the bills year on year for the last 10 years. And you can do the inflation calculations. But I mean, our economists have done that. And certainly the regulators made a speech in 2017 talking about the decade of declining bills. And bills have come down in real terms and then popped back up a little bit. But over the 10 years, they've been flat in real terms.
Okay, well, I'll take your word for it, although it doesn't feel that
No,
way. is
well,
all
I
can
understand it
say.
doesn't feel that way, but I mean, I can show you the calculations. I haven't done them, but I can show them the ones that have been done. It's in our business plan. It's in our annual reports, and I'm pretty sure that the whole thing's been very carefully, independently verified. So I don't think anybody's made the numbers up.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, everybody. I'm keen to move on now. We've, where are we? 10 to 9. We now need to have a no notice procedural motion to suspend standing orders and permit members of the public to speak. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Gawley. Seconder, Councillor Bowick. Can we have a vote on that, please? Yep. Great, thank you very much indeed. I think it might be nice if we can try and wrap up by 9:30. Obviously don't want to stymie debate, but if people could be brief in their questions, I'd be very, very grateful. I'm also conscious, Dave, did you say you needed to leave by a certain time? You'll stay. Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. So I'm going to take it in order of our guests that are sitting here, and then I'll go to our 2 guests online, if I may. So first of all, Peter from River Action, would you like to ask a question?
Thank you. My name is Peter. I'm Secretary for a fly fishing club on the Pang, and I'm here on behalf of River Action UK. Thanks to the Commission for the opportunity to ask a question. Madam Chair, before I ask a question, could I be permitted to call out some statistics from Thames Water's presentation where I believe they've misled the Chamber? Yes. Thank you. On 21st of September, we were shown a photograph of the Pang from Pangbourne Bridge, and it was stated there was no discharges from Hampstead Norreys on that day. There were, in fact, discharges from Buckleby Sewage Works for 3 days solid from the 20th to the 23rd of September, from Chapel Row from overnight on the 20th to the 21st of September, and from Beanham on the 20th of September for 45 minutes. We were also shown a slide on 2022 and how the Pang had been downgraded to poor, and it was stated that there were no sewage leaks from Hampstead Norreys. I'd just like to state that there were 42 sewage leaks from other sewage works into the Pang chalk stream on that year. My question is a bit broader on water security. Can Thames Water talk to us about, with the lack of investment over the last 30 years, there's been no new reservoirs, there's been 600 million litres of water leaking a day from your systems. How are you going to ensure the water security for West Berkshire and further down into the capital in your next 5-year plan? Thank you.
Okay, well, the water resources is covered in the water resource management plan, which we have consulted on and published, and is now with the government. And that is in 2 parts. The first thing is it seeks to get demand down significantly through reducing leakage, through fitting more meters, and through encouraging water efficiency. And if anybody could guarantee us the same climate and the same population, that's all we'd need to do. But clearly climate's changing, population is growing. So we need to have more water resource as well. And our plan talks about a big new reservoir in the vicinity of Abingdon. And it also talks about other measures that will be taken, including a water reuse scheme in West London. And those things together are the more immediate things. In the longer term, we may also need to do water transfers from other parts of the country. But the 2 main big resource options are the reservoir, which has been talked about for a very long time and has always been opposed, but is now very much back on the agenda. It's up to the government to decide what to do about it. And as I say, a more complicated water reuse scheme in West London that I won't describe now because it'll take 5 minutes. Thank you. And those things, I should say, Dave, are factored in that we will also be reducing some of our abstractions from sensitive rivers and groundwater sources, the so-called sustainability reductions. That's also factored into the equation of how we meet the demand we expect to get from our customers over that period.
Thank you very much, Peter. Charlotte Hitchmo from the Action for the River Kennet.
Thank you. Richard, you explained that that you were permitted to discharge untreated sewage during periods of rainwater and snowmelt. But could we have some clarity on whether discharges of untreated sewage caused by groundwater are illegal or legal?
So storm overflows due primarily to groundwater infiltration are not permitted.
Thank you. And so bearing in mind that at Hampstead Norris in 2021, the treatment work spilled for 2,622 hours. And in 2020 was Thames Water's worst performing sewage treatment works in terms of frequency and duration across their business. Has there been an investigation by the Environment Agency and will that lead to prosecution?
So as I mentioned in my summary, we've driven the requirement for event duration monitoring to be installed at all storm overflow sites by the end of this current calendar year. And as Richard referred to, those began coming online in 2018, 2019. So yes, we currently have active investigations in assessing that information and assessing its compliance with environmental permits. And we will consider that, and if we confirm any non-compliance, we'll take appropriate action in line with our enforcement and sanctions policy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Martin Wright from East Garston Flood Forum.
Martin Wright, East Garston Flood and Pollution Forum. First, can I just, before I ask my question, make an observation or a thought? If you've talked a lot about sewage discharges being highly diluted before they go into the river, I'm thinking if I drink a double whiskey neat or drink a double whiskey in a gallon of water, I think I've still consumed a double whiskey. That's just an observation. Maybe I'm wrong. My question, we've met before. You attended, Richard, a meeting on in May when we discussed East Garston. I'm going to be very parochial. I'm just going to talk about East Garston. At that meeting, you gave a commitment to keep us informed about plans that were underway for the sewage network repairs in East Garston or our part of the Lambourne Valley. In fact, it was said then that some investigations had already happened and the sewage network is inundated with groundwater, and hopefully we can find something significant and can start work on it in the summer. And hopefully by next winter, we'll be able to test the theory. Nothing has happened. We've not heard anything about this work plan. I wrote to Thames Water earlier in September, and eventually I got a reply back saying that we have found a significant volume of water coming into the network across Eastbury, which affects us, and we will be putting together a business justification to secure funding to get these locations sealed. So yet again, that's another year gone. And we've had this year after year after year. You make commitments and somehow they don't seem to happen, not with any speed. I know some repairs were carried out, and I think those were referred to in your presentation on your slide, but that was about 3 years ago, I think. So I don't know whether you're, well, I'm sure you are aware, the groundwater levels at the moment in East Garston, in the Lambourne Valley generally, are the highest they have been at this time of the year for at least 10 years. The records that we keep just locally indicate that, and we're right at the top. Last year, the groundwater at this level was some 2 meters lower than it is now. We have had quite a wet summer, latter part of the summer. Now, I'm not a hydrologist, but common sense tells me groundwater levels are high. We've had a lot of rain. That water level this winter, this coming winter, is going to be high. Last year, we...
Mr. Wright, sorry, are you able to clarify what your question is, please?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
So you can get the drift where I'm coming from. Last year, or in previous years, you've had 3 options to deal with this. 1, allow the streets and gardens to flood with sewage. 2, dumping it in the river, or 3, tankers, a fleet of tankers working 24/7. Which option are you going to choose this year?
So last year, I believe we had tankers there, which was our response to, we do have a overflow, and that overflow, we need to do some work on that because we don't think it reflected exactly what went on, but we did put tankers out there. That will be our response this year. We have looked at other options. We used other options in the Lambourne area, and we have used other options in other areas. I don't think we've got the room to do that work around that mitigation whilst we continue to do our investigations and do the work that we've been doing. So it will be a tanker to keep on top of that.
So we can look forward to 24/7 tankers coming
I
through
don't
the village.
enjoy doing it, and it's the last resort. It literally is the last resort. If I don't, I'm going to be discharging to a watercourse. I don't want to do that either, as much as that water is diluted. So when we have surcharge in other areas of the valley, we have monitored closely, and we did not have an impact to that watercourse through that discharge because it was so diluted. We had a filter unit to take out the solids, because historically when it comes out of a manhole, it goes unfiltered. And when it's unfiltered, it can go to watercourse. We put a filter in, and all the surcharge that would otherwise have left a manhole, we filtered it and allow the liquid that year, or the times we've used that, we've demonstrated there's been no impact. But it shows how much of the things that are in the sewers that shouldn't be in there. But we don't have the facility in East Garston to put that in.
So why wasn't the work done earlier?
Sorry?
Why wasn't the work done earlier?
We still have an opportunity. We hope to deliver that work. We've got a lot of work we need to deliver. There's a lot of places we need to do this work. The teams are going to work up to the point where we cannot do it because of the groundwater.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Keith Hoddenott from Thatch and Flood Forum.
Thank you, Chair. My question is of a general and a national basis. When I joined the Thatch and Flood Forum, the colleagues there said that at a planning appeal, the planning inspector, after evidence from the developer, said that drainage was not a planning matter. Now, my point is that if you have a future business plan which sets out all the spend on different projects which have come to the fore, that if suddenly a development comes along which you hadn't planned for, then it's obvious that if there are deficiencies in the infrastructure, both in the sewers and at the sewage treatment plant and pumping stations, then if there is insufficient capacity to take the new development, then surely it should be refused on planning as being premature. And if the developer wishes to pursue the development, then he puts his hand in his pockets and gets you the money to do the improvement so that the development can go ahead. This used to happen before 1974. Now, the inability of the government to enact Schedules 3 and 42 is a prime reason for developers to avoid having their systems adopted. And I feel that, and I've been told, that Thames are not a statutory consultee on planning matters. Now, is that true? And therefore, should we not be the EA, the water companies and councils be more robust with developers in refusing developments which will endanger the existing structure? And if they win on an appeal, then it means that these schemes in the older parts of the area where there are gross infiltration due to the nature of the pipework which was installed in the 50s, those issues will be put back because you've had to put in improvements to your existing system to cater for a new development?
We are statutory consultees on local plans, but not on individual planning applications. So we rely on liaison between our developer services team and council officers. And I have to say that works very well in this council. So we do know what is coming in terms of developments. And we will assess whether first of all, whether the sewer network has the capacity to take the additional flow that we're being asked to take. If it's not going to be sufficient, then the developer charges, which all developers pay for all developments, that creates a pot of money which is used to expand the network when necessary. So we will, if we need to expand the network, we will put in place measures to expand it or to take water out somewhere else or to basically to make sure we can cope with the amount of water we're going to get from the new development. If we can't do that within the timescale of the developer's aspirations, then we can ask the council to put in what's called a Grampian condition, which basically says that development shouldn't be occupied until the network reinforcement has been completed. There is a twist to that because developers tell us that they're going to give us their foul water. And of course, they say they're going to make perfectly good arrangements for the surface water to go somewhere else. And as we talked earlier, the foul flow is very, very much less than the surface flow. Where we do get problems is where developers say one thing and do another, and we end up with the surface water. So there is a question here about building regulations, about proper inspections, and whether we actually get what we're supposed to get. The other one is if the flow is going to tip the sewage works over capacity. And what we do there is if we are not confident that the works can robustly meet all of its compliance requirements with this additional flow, we will again ask for a Grampian condition to be imposed until such time as we can expand the works. And the money for that, confusingly, comes from the business planning process as a growth impact. So in the business plan, you will see some things highlighted as growth schemes, where we've had a steer from the council that there's more development coming. So we don't want to put in we don't want to ask for Grampian conditions. We can't impose them, the council does, because we don't want to stop house building. I mean, that's not our job. Our job is to provide a good water and wastewater service. But if we physically can't do it in the time available, then we will ask the council for a Grampian condition. They have the responsibility on this, not us.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Kay Lacey from Pang Valley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Thames. This is a question for Karen. Karen, thank you. It's really good to hear that Hampstead Norris work is going to be starting soon. I just wondered if anybody in the parish council had been informed. We haven't heard. They have? We haven't heard anything.
Well, there are letters literally going out, I think today or tomorrow. I've seen the letter and it's signed, so it won't be long before it hits people's doorsteps.
Thank you. So this is, my question really is about the sewer depth monitors and infiltration. So we know that we've got a lot of the areas in the Pang catchment that suffer from groundwater infiltration. And your GISMs, and I've read quite a few of them, are very reliant on there being reliable data from these sewer depth monitors, as well as CCTV and that sort of thing. We've had access to the sewer data from the sewer loggers, but there are problems with gaps due to lack of transmission. Now, we've been informed from Thames that these gaps are due to poor network coverage, as Thames have opted to go with one chosen supplier on economic grounds. If there's insufficient coverage with Thames's chosen supplier, could we ask that Thames get multi-network SIMs installed so that reliable data can be had, which will then enable you and us to fine-tune exactly where the infiltration is coming in, which will enable your sewer lining or other investment work to be effectively planned. Without this information, we can't really gain an accurate picture as to exactly where the infiltration is coming in.
Thank you. Yes, there has been some data issues with receiving some of that information in. There is ongoing conversations around what loggers and where to put them and how to move forward. we had a big programme to install many loggers, and that's under review because we want them to be available. There's no point us progressing, putting them in unless they are all coming back. So I will certainly get this area, because it is a particular, obviously a hot spot, highlighted and see if we can progress, particularly in that area, for a solution for that. With regards to the Hampstead Norris, apologies, I didn't mention it earlier. So the letters are going out. They will be doing some surveys. So the work they're starting is survey work. I think it's feeding back on your microphones, sorry. Yeah. So they will be doing some survey work on the section 104As, which is the private sewers that were adopted in 2011, because for much of the estate that isn't mapped at this stage unless we've had previous incidents or blockages, because we map it when we're there. There are going to be investigations across all that piece, and as they find pieces, they're looking to follow up with the lining behind them as well. So whilst there is some currently known places to deliver, that should be being delivered in conjunction with the survey work, with an end date of, I think it's around May next year, to finish the piece out there, all dependent on that groundwater level. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, because we're concerned that groundwater levels are higher than last year. And with that, that's the other reason why we need accurate transmission data coming through, because it's now or never really to get that sort of information. Absolutely. And the area that we're particularly looking at is Stamford Dingley, which was mentioned by Christopher earlier.
Yeah, and that is Stamford Dingley is October, so it's this month delivery. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Unfortunately, Councillor Wollaston, who was online, has had to leave the meeting, so he won't be able to ask a question. So apologies to Councillor Wollaston. So last but not least, we have Paula Saunderson from Newbury Clay Hill Flood Forum, who I believe is online. Yeah. Would you like to ask your question, Paula?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't start my video because the host won't allow me.
Okay, we can hear you clearly.
Right. Hello, thank you very much, Richard, Karen and Mr. Willis, for attending tonight. I have sent through quite a lot of evidence to both of you concerning the surface water systems, drainage systems for Newbury, called the Northbrook Ditch. And I made quite a few requests. Is there any way that you can help us with the fact that the surface water that comes out of the outfall is heavily polluted? When it rains, we get black pollution, and it has now settled to the depth of 1.5 metres in certain places, and it's now quite noxious and dangerous. So Karen, if you're looking at our whole confluence area between the Lambourne and the Kennet and our groundwater around Newport Road and all the rest of it, because that actually feeds into the Northbrook Ditch, would you be able to look at the the surface water systems as well as the sewage and the groundwater?
Yeah, Paula, we've all been poring over the photographs and videos that you've sent, and there's a whole. No, it was absolutely fine. I mean, it makes depressing viewing, because clearly from the few pictures that show it in good conditions, it looks as though it's good, clean spring water flowing along there. But there's a whole mess of different issues, from suds that don't work to industrial pollution to highway runoff, and no surface water management plan. So I'm going to pass over to Karen in a second for more detail. But in principle, what we'd like to suggest is a tripartite meeting, or possibly series of meetings between ourselves, the Environment Agency and the council, to get the maps out and try and look at all of the issues, and then work out what needs to be done, what order it needs to be done, and where can we get the funding to do it. Because clearly there's a lot of things wrong there. It's not a single cause or problem, but it needs to be looked at holistically by the three agencies. Karen.
And just to follow up on that, Paula, just to split it into some of the different fragments that have been passed over, I think some of it came from a development that was discharging groundwater, which then turned the watercourse a cloudy, milky colour. As soon as that was notified to us, we identified the cause of that, and within one evening they stopped continuing.
Yeah, sorry, Karen, that happened again today.
I've been out there
we had another white pollution today, and we haven't had one for about a year. So we think we know what causes those.
Okay, well, I'll catch up with you if it's happened again. All I can reiterate is I need phone calls each time this happens. I know it can be frustrating to phone through, but today Richard shared with everybody the ability to report online. I would like to know at the time that these are happening so we can get that quick response to find it whilst it's in action, because it helps us trace it back up the line where it's coming from. So I'm not aware of any white discharge today. I was out there all afternoon seeing a nice clear brook, but if it happened outside those hours, then we'll follow it up. In terms of the oil, we have done some thorough and broad investigations. We've got one particular location of major interest, and we're following up with our network protection team, who undertake site visits to look at fat management of cooking oils and other products. They will investigate, and if there is no fat management in place, then we will issue our polite letters asking them to install, and we'll continue our visits until we see an improvement in that. But as I say, please do highlight when these happen, because I couldn't find them for everything that was sent through. I couldn't see a massive history of when we've been able to attend to investigate during the incidents.
Well, I've since August, I've been in the gardens on 3 or 4 occasions where I've waited for your engineers, and they've obviously responded. But you're right. The history of this has not been well reported, and it's only because of my interest and basically the ecological side of it, because wildlife is now suffering and dying. Because I've owned property in this area and seen this brook deteriorate gradually, and now my involvement with the residents has brought it to the fore. So as long as we can get that that's what my request is, that we have the 3 risk management authorities looking at this together, to try and find some solutions to what is becoming a worsening pollution, not from poo, but it's from industrial pollution of some sort, and especially when it rains.
Yeah, thank you, Paula.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your help. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for your questions. Much appreciated. I think it's been a really, really useful meeting this evening. I'm very grateful that you've come along and you've answered so many questions. Thank you very much to members for their very robust and detailed questions, and also members of the public. I'm sorry that we weren't able to give you more time. I'm sure we could sit here for several more hours and go through it in detail. Mr. Oliver has made very comprehensive notes. There will be minutes of the meeting. This recording this evening will also be on YouTube in perpetuity, so anyone who hasn't been able to watch it will be able to do so. Anyone who wants to go back and look at the detail, perhaps you could share with your fellow members who might be interested that they might like to have a look at it, and likewise the groups, you might like to encourage your members. I'd just like to make one point. Are we happy that we have contact details, that everyone has lines of communication into Thames Water and the Environment Agency? Are our officers content that we've got contacts and we know how to report things to one another? Yeah. Okay.
So, Madam Chairman, can we make sure they're all on the minutes? That would be helpful.
Yes, absolutely. So Richard, you very helpfully pointed out to us the website where people can report things. I don't know, Dave, is there anything on the Environment Agency website that you want to draw our attention to?
No, I think 2 things really. Firstly, we have a 24-hour hotline for our environmental incidents, 0800 807060, which again, we would ask people to report promptly. We will assess all those reports, risk assess them, and we will respond to serious incidents. We are unable to respond to lower risk incidents. And I will provide you with an email address for any inquiries to come through to our customers engagement team.
Great. Okay, thank you very much indeed. I will also talk to our planning officers as well about the stuff that we've discussed this evening, just to make sure. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, sorry. To Richard or Karen, who do I contact if there are environmental incidents from Thames Water? Because you are very difficult to get hold of, get hold of the right people within your organisation.
To be honest, reporting it online through the tool that I showed you is the quickest way to get somebody dispatched to look at it.
Okay.
But if you want to, you can always give me a call, or you can always give Nikki a call. And if you think something's being missed, or there's a serious environmental incident or flooding to somebody's home, we want to know about it, and we'll get onto it. So I'm not asking you to call me every single time you see something, but so the report online is best, but you can always use us as a backup if you think we're missing something.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So yes, I will speak to our planning department and alert them to the fact that this recording is available and the minutes will be on their way. And if colleagues could ask Councillor Abbs to have a look at the recording as well, I think that would be a really good idea. So we don't need to do a vote on anything this evening. Just remains for me to thank you all again very much. Thank you to members of the public for coming along as well and taking an interest in this issue. And I will draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much indeed, everyone.
Thank you.